All right, let's go live, perps. We got a little while. Let's give it a minute, see who joins up, and then we got a hell of a clown show from today to watch. Which cut that down so I get the echo from that. Got to see some of this today. Didn't see nearly all of it. Daniel, what's up, brother, man? Brother, live life. What's going on with you? How you doing today, brother? Hey, live life. We got a few more gun control bills popping up in Alabama, brother. Couple of them are going to go to committees tomorrow. I'm hoping I'll be able to stream those. Sam, what's up, brother? I ain't seen you in a bit, man. How you been? So I will try if I can, and I am going to try to stream this shit popping up in Alabama. We knew about the safe storage bill, a couple others. We talked about those, a couple weeks ago when we looked at it. And some of these bills just showed up. I checked them 2-3 days ago, and there was only, I think, 12 bills showing up then. 12, 13. Now there's like 17 bills showing up. So I still got to read through all of them. So yeah, the Democrats in Alabama ain't trying to cut anybody no slack. Sam, I'm about the same, man. I'm living a dream as always. One of these days I'll figure out whose dream it is, and I'm going to kick him right in the nuts. All right, let's see. Screen share. This is it. So this is from today. This is talking about reigning in the administrative state. And all you guys should know by now, or should have heard by now, Elon Musk is killing these people. Him and old Big Balls. And they are throwing absolute fits right now. So just the little bit of this hearing I saw, which was only the first few minutes of it, you're going to see a whole lot of crying from Democrats. And I mean, it's awful juicy. I can't help it. It's beautiful to me. I can't even lie about that. So let's crank it up. You guys let me know whether the sound and everything's good.
For the administrative state and look for ways that we can reform the regulatory and administrative law to work better for everyday Americans. It's no secret that regulatory burdens have reached an all-time high. Regulatory agencies create rules with the force and effect of law. And the number of rules that agencies create is overwhelming. In the final year of the Biden-Harris administration, unelected bureaucrats finalized over 3,000 rules. It's an average of 8 regulations per day. By contrast, during the same period,
try to turn it where I can kind of talk over because I want to let this play.
In other words, the executive branch issued mandates with the force of law over 20 times more often than the legislative branch. According to the
Although it's going to be really hard not to pause this sometimes. And that, like, again, I just saw the first few minutes of this shit.
Of 2.1 trillion or more than $15,000 per American household. Some of my colleagues on the other side may claim that because Congress cannot pass laws,
have you guys heard all the stuff about the guy worked for Elon Musk, Big Balls?
To think deeply about these decisions. Congress was also designed.
I got to do a compilation of this guy to the actual song.
Our constituents do not like our
Big Balls from ACDC.
And we are voted out of office. Unelected bureaucrats, by contrast, are not politically accountable. This lack of accountability shows. When agencies make these rules, they not only act as a legislator for the country, but often as prosecutors and judges through the administrative process. Agencies often bring enforcement actions in their in-house administrative courts. The same agency that makes the rules also decides to sue if a person broke them. Then to prove that a person broke the rule, the agency tries the case before its own in-house judge in so-called quote-unquote independent agencies. Commissioners who directly prosecute the case also act as judges on appeal. The whole system defies logic at this point. The administrative system is set up to regulate people into submission, which is entirely with the principle this country was founded on. Our founders deliberately split the making of laws, enforcement of laws, and judgment of laws into three co-equal branches of government. About exactly the same centralized power we now see in the administrative state. Split the making of laws. It does not have to be this way. Last Congress state, the Reins Act, the Midnight Rules Relief Act, the Prove It Act, Separation of Powers Restoration Act, and the One Agency Act, just to name a few.
It gets, trust me, it gets way better when the Democrats roll
topic
in.
We are here to talk about today.
It gets way
Reining in the administrative state. I'm proud of the work this committee undertook last Congress, and I hope for the American people that we turn these proposals into law this Congress. The colleagues on the other side of the aisle routinely oppose all attempts by Congress to rein in the administrative state. They also criticize President Trump for taking steps to control the administrative state. They ignore that the Constitution makes the president the leader of the executive branch. They will do everything in their power to protect these unaccountable bureaucrats, do the bidding of my colleagues in the minority.
All right, hold on, because my connection just went absolutely retarded. Now it's back up. So we'll see if my country ass connection will hang on here. If not, fuck it. We'll just turn it into a hangout and we'll shoot the shit.
Written extensively on how damaging regulatory burdens are on the economy. These witnesses are perfectly prepared to supply members of the committee with the required information to better inform us as we work on possible solutions and consider the proposals that have already been introduced. I want to thank the witnesses for appearing before us today and look forward to hearing what each of you has
Hopefully
to
that was
say
just a
on the
hiccup.
topic. I now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Nadler, for his opening statement.
Here we go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, holding a hearing today on, quote, reining in the administrative state is a bit like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. As we speak, Elon Musk and his band of near
Oh,
teenage
Humpty
accomplices
Dumpty.
are systematically working their way through the executive branch, knocking down agency after agency while undermining the rule of law and shredding the Constitution along the way.
Choke on it, Jerry.
Have unprecedented access to our most sensitive and personal data. They have gained access to extremely sensitive tax information at the IRS, highly restricted government records on millions of federal employees and their families from the Office of Personnel Management, and personal data related to health insurance plans, workplace safety and health investigations, child labor, and more from the Department of Labor. And this is just what we have learned through news articles.
Now, who's the
Because all
purple
these
haired
actions have
chick
been
next
taken
to
without any
Nadler?
transparency to the American people. Musk and his team have accessed at least 18 agencies and untold amounts of
Well,
sensitive data
that's
that
assuming it's
attracted
chick.
to bad actors here and abroad. But Musk and his assistants are not just accessing this data. They are feeding it into AI models, downloading it onto commercial servers, and possibly taking it off premises. Because Musk and his team can also change our government systems. Not only is the personal information of millions of Americans at risk, but also the systems that ensure our safety and core government functions. For example, Musk and his team have accessed core systems at the Federal Aviation Administration. Experts have warned that, quote, even a small system disruption could cause mass grounding of flights, a halt in global shipping, or worse, downed planes. Officials at the FAA warned
Just a
going onto
lying
these
sack of
systems,
shit.
into these systems without an in-depth understanding could result in death and an economic harm to our nation. Nevertheless, Musk indicated that the Doge team will aim to make, quote, rapid safety upgrades to the air traffic control system. Just in the past few weeks, we have seen what happens when mistakes are made in our air traffic control system. And a Black Hawk helicopter ran into a commercial flight, resulting in dozens of deaths.
Did he
Musk and
say
his
Black
team are
Rock or
opening us up
Black
to more
Hawk?
deaths and critical economic harm. But Elon Musk is not content just to cause massive disruption and expose us to greater risk. No, he is also using his unfettered access to our agencies and our data to benefit himself. For example, the Department of Labor was investigating workplace abuse allegations at 3 Musk-owned companies: the Boring Company, SpaceX, and Tesla. So, Musk and his team invaded the agency and gained access to their information on current and past investigations. Just days before they
Which
got
were all
access to the
horse
Consumer
shit.
Financial Protection Bureau, Musk finalized a deal with Visa to process peer-to-peer payments for a wallet feature on X. Because the CFPP policies, because the CFPP polices such payment systems, the data Musk and his team access to give his new X wallet feature a competitive advantage in the market. And as a kicker, the Trump administration instructed the CFPB to halt its work, thus ensuring that there's no one to keep Musk's new payment system from exposing personal data or enabling fraud. Never mind that the CFPB has produced almost $20 billion in consumer relief and has put millions back in
They
the
haven't
pockets of
produced
Americans.
consumer
The
relief.
agency
They
had information
fine
Musk
companies and the
needed,
government
so he
collects
got it.
that money. You
The agency would have
fucking
enforced the
lying
law
sack.
with a likely impact on his wallet, so the agency's work was halted instead. Serious concerns have been raised about whether the people accessing this data, many of them barely passed college, have the appropriate training and vetting necessary to handle such sensitive data. That is an active data breach on a scale we have never experienced before. But this time, the threat is coming from inside the House. Imagine what domestic criminals or foreign adversaries could do if they got their hands on this information. This is a clear and present danger, and yet our Republican colleagues
Clear and present danger.
In addition to these structural attacks on the executive
A
branch,
government that
the Trump
collects
administration is
every
also
bit of our
reclassifying
electronic
civil
data
servants as
is
political
pissed because
employees
someone's
who can be
auditing them.
replaced with flunkies beholden to Donald Trump, imposing loyalty tests on national security officials and encouraging tens of thousands of employees to resign with promises it has no authority to make. As a result, it is hollowing out the workforce and the decades of experience and technical expertise that comes with it. Without any authorization
The
from
technical
Congress,
expertise
Trump
and trampling all
administration
of our
has also
rights
taken
and collecting all
several
of our
other actions
data
that
and
have thrown the
spying
federal
on us.
government into
Yeah,
chaos.
sure.
It
Same
attempted
with
to
anarchy.
impose
What's
a,
up, my
quote,
brother? How you
temporary
doing today?
funding freeze,
I'm
unquote,
doing all right, man.
across much of
Same
the
old
federal
same.
government that a judge has already ruled unlawful. It fired duly appointed Democratic members of independent agencies to deprive these agencies of a working quorum and essentially prevent them from fulfilling their missions. And to ensure that no one is able to hold the administration accountable from within the executive branch, the president fired more than a dozen inspectors general without following the statutory requirements for doing so.
Ah, but he
These
didn't have
actions
to.
are as unconstitutional
He
as they are
did
dangerous.
follow
We witness these
statutory.
incursions
He
on the
didn't
rule of
do
law
it.
and the Constitution.
Technically, their
Republican colleagues
boss did it.
do nothing. In fact, they cheer on Elon Musk as he usurps congressional
Yeah,
authority.
same old saying, man.
Arrogates
SSDD,
unprecedented
same
power to
shit, different
himself.
day.
When Joe Biden was president, we heard stirring speeches from our Republican friends about the need to assert our Article I authority. We were told that the Biden administration was guilty of dangerous overreach when it attempted to help people drowning in student loans, or protected our communities from gun violence, or helped shield consumers from corporate abuse. But now that is ancient history. Now they aid and abet shadow President Musk while he bulldozes his way through the administrative state.
That's the narrative they've been trying to push. Shadow President Musk.
Or authorization. There is no check and no balance from the Republican Congress. Just feckless inaction because it serves their purposes.
There's two narratives. So there's Shadow President Musk,
provided by
and then there's somehow Trump voters have buyer's remorse
responsibilities and let Elon
because
Musk
Trump's doing
do
all
their
this shit
dirty
to the
work.
federal government.
I urge my Republican colleagues to stand up for this institution and for the people they represent. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize Chairman of the full committee, Mr. Jordan, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Instead of stopping the stupid
SHSD,
spending,
yeah.
Democrats attack the guy
Same
who's
horse shit,
exposing
different
it.
day. Yep.
I think the
True
taxpayers
that,
of this
brother,
country would
true
just
that.
assume we stop spending their money on dumb things. Like what was the example from USAID? Some transgender comic in Ireland spending money on Bert and Ernie and Big Bird on Baghdad TV. I think they would prefer we not do that. Elon Musk is doing, exposing in the federal government exactly
honestly,
what he exposed
if
on
I had
Twitter when he
known Trump
purchased
was
Twitter.
going to come
What did
in
we find out
swinging
there?
like he
Big
did this
government
time,
was pressuring
I
big
still
tech
would have
to
voted.
censor Americans. You don't have to take my word for it. We had the Twitter files. Oh, and we also had someone else in big tech send a letter to this committee and tell us exactly what they were doing. Mark Zuckerberg said the Biden administration was pressuring us to censor. We did it. We're sorry. We won't do it again. Told the whole world that in a letter to this committee. So Elon Musk is now doing that for the federal government. We think that's a good thing. And to understand the fundamental difference the left has with us conservatives. Democrats believe it is the career elected bureaucrats who are supposed to run the country. We don't think that's the way it's supposed to work. We actually think it's the people who put their name on a ballot who get elected by we the people who make the decisions. And the guy who got 77 million votes on November 5th says he wants Elon Musk working for him, the elected member who heads the executive branch working for him, every bit as much as the federal employees, the people in Treasury who are supposed to have all the answers, or in USAID who be the career officials, working for him to expose stupid things our government is spending money on. And the Democrats are going to attack that guy? Go ahead. Go right ahead. But we know the real consequences of having this administrative state, these bureaucrats run things. We got two witnesses here who've lived it, Miss Wade and Mr. Smith. They're here to tell about how that had some impacted their business. So I appreciate the chairman having this hearing. This is exactly the kind of hearing we have to have. And I appreciate the work the president and his team.
Oh, and trust
are
me,
doing
you know
to
the
expose
Democrats
the
picked a
stupid
witness for
things
their
that
side who was an
bureaucrats
absolute
spend the
bootlegger.
hard-earned money, the people we get the privilege of representing. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Now recognize
That
the ranking
joker
member of the full
brushes his
committee,
teeth with
Mr. Raskin.
boot-flavored tooth polish.
Thank you very
Or
much,
toothpaste.
Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the ranking member of the subcommittee, Mr. Nadler, and thank you to my colleague, Chairman Jordan. And thanks to all of our witnesses for being here with us today.
This is priceless.
I was surprised to hear my friend from Ohio talking about a transgender comic book from I can't remember which country, but if there's a form of government expenditure taking place that we have a problem with, isn't that why the congressional oversight function exists? Don't we have a whole oversight committee which you serve on?
Well, if you guys were doing the oversight, you douchebag,
need to
you wouldn't need someone else to audit
a
this
fourth
shit.
branch of government called Elon
You
Musk to go out and do
sleazeball.
it for us. We're about to enter into a budget process right now. We can deal with it ourselves. Mr. Chairman, the last 22 days, Donald Trump's billionaire government has taken a wrecking ball to public institutions and the rule of law in America. The agent of the chaos is Elon Musk, a quote,
Elon
special
Musk,
government
the agent of
employee
chaos.
purportedly working on technological reform. More
I would
crucially,
give
he's a
them
big
some
businessman
bitches
who's
free
floundering Tesla sales in
Adderall
Europe,
and Red
create
Bull.
huge
Keep them
financial
working
pressures
24
for him, according to the business
7
press.
to keep
Even more
doing the work they're
crucially,
doing.
he's a government contractor who collects billions of
I would
federal
roll a
taxpayer dollars
wheelbarrow full of
every single
Adderall
year,
over there
and
to
yet
him
has
and
not
just have him
filed
freaking
a
pick it
single
up by the
employee
bucket
ethics
load.
disclosure form
Keep
as
working.
required by law. He
Big
has
ball,
access not only to
take a break.
computers controlling his own billion-dollar payments from us, the people, but to computers containing his contractor rivals'
Did he say
contract
contractor?
bids, their contracts, their invoices, and their payment systems. Yet he has not shown us a single conflict of interest waiver form for these multiple egregious
The dude
apparent
literally
conflicts of
went
interest.
and rescued
He and his
NASA
mutant teenage
astronauts because
racist
you dumb
computer
shits in the
hackers
federal
have
government
taken possession
couldn't get it
of
done.
financial payment systems at the United States Department of Treasury, meaning data access to the
He
private
puts
financial
rockets
records
into
of every
space
American citizen,
and
every
recovers
member
the
of
land or
Congress,
recovers
every
the
federal
fucking boosters.
prosecutor, every
Where you
regulator
bastards have
who's
been
supposed
dumping
to be
them in the
looking at what
ocean for
his business
decades.
does. Every private lawyer and every federal
Abigail,
judge
sup, my
who they're now
sister. What's
calling for
going
the
on?
impeachment of because they
You
dare
ever
to speak
find the
up
land you
for
want
the
to
rule
get?
of law. What could go wrong with this situation? Fortunately, we do still have an Article 3, a working federal judiciary, which has issued no fewer than
working
12
federal
injunctions
judiciary.
in 3
If
weeks.
you call that federal
12
judiciary
temporary restraining
working,
orders
you're
or
a
preliminary
dumb
injunctions
son of a
in
bitch.
3 weeks against the illegality of this arrangement, including an injunction against any further unlawful seizure, possession, and corruption of Americans' private financial data.
28K with
Now,
a house. Nice,
the
Abby.
Elon Musk cyber raid against our
What state is
data
it in? You still
and
going up
privacy
to
infrastructure has set the stage for the administration's
shit,
outrageous
I forgot where you said
and
it. Somewhere up
unprecedented
north, damn it.
violation of congressional lawmaking and spending power. That's what the first hearing of this subcommittee should be about, Mr. Chairman. The blatantly illegal and quickly reversed freeze on billions of dollars in federal grants already appropriated
Maine, that's it.
by
Yeah.
the United States Congress,
Good deal.
programmed by the agencies, contracted for by government lawyers, and
That's
in
your goal?
the proper
Hell yeah,
pipeline for payment. The flagrantly illegal efforts to not pay federal workers and honor our contracts for work already rendered, to condition federal funds on totally made up restrictions never voted on, much less
Been there for a
approved
decade. A
by
decade
Congress,
for a
in
house
the
ain't that
scandalous
damn long.
effort to dismantle and
DB
neutralize
Cooper, brother,
entire
man.
federal
How-
agencies like NOAA, USAID, and the CFPB, spitting
Raskin and
in the
shit,
face of
yeah.
congressional power enactments and appropriations. An
Chambered
appropriations
fence,
act
brother.
is a
How are you,
federal
man?
law,
It's been a little bit.
like
Well,
any
I
other
mean, you were
law.
in a couple of them.
Like the law, for example,
lately, so
against violently
hopefully you're
assaulting
doing well, man.
federal police officers. An appropriations act is not a recommendation.
Oh, he's got sand in
or
his
a
badge
bargaining
about
maneuver
Elon going
with
in there and
executive
pulling out all
branch.
the dirty
It is a
laundry.
law. It must be enforced. This administration needs a constitutional refresher course, Mr. Chairman. The preamble of the Constitution
Drunk
says,
talking
"We,
about
the
a military
people,
experience.
in order to form a more
That
perfect
could be good or
union,
bad.
establish justice, ensure
Working like
domestic
crazy.
tranquility,
Good deal, brother.
provide for the
Hopefully you're
common
staying
defense,
safe,
promote
man.
the general welfare,
Still
and
hitting that
preserve
range.
to ourselves and our posterity the blessings of liberty, do
Exposing their-
hereby
that's
ordain and
exactly what they're
establish
pissed
the
about, man. They're
Constitution of these
exposing their
United
horse
States."
shit.
And the very next sentence of the Constitution establishes in Article 1 the Congress of the United States possessing all of the legislative power. Some of my colleagues have taken to saying we're 3 co-equal branches. I beg to differ. We're not 3 co-equal branches. Not at all. First of all, co-equal is not even a word, right? That's like extremely unique. It doesn't mean anything. So they're saying 3 equal branches. I don't think so. Read James Madison, the
dude,
Federalist Papers.
Abby,
Congress is the
that ain't
predominant
saying
branch.
the half of
Congress is the lawmaking branch. It's Congress. Check out Article 1, Section 8. All of the powers we have to regulate commerce domestically and internationally, to pass the
Nice,
budget,
Chamber.
to appropriate money. Congress does that. And then Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, and all other powers necessary and
Up to
proper
the
to
yes.
the execution of the foregoing powers. And after all of that, you get to 4 short paragraphs in Article 2. My friend, Mr. Jordan, has been quoting the first sentence all over TV. It's
Oh, Oh, he's got his
that
pocket
he somehow has a
constitution.
knockout argument. He says the executive power shall be vested in
So
a
many
president of the United States of
misquotes
America.
every time he
Yes, indeed,
fucking
Mr.
reads it.
Jordan. That's where the executive power is vested. But
Yeah,
what
guys,
is
I'm in
the
a mood,
executive
so
power? The core responsibility of the president of the United
buckle
States
up.
is to take care that the laws are faithfully executed, right? Not defied, not violated, not trashed, not rewritten, to take care that the laws are faithfully
First of all,
executed, which
laws
is
have to be
precisely what's not happening
constitutional
today.
and then be
Because
faithfully
they say, oh,
executed,
well,
you
Elon
slimy
Musk,
bastard.
he's got all the power of the president. Donald Trump himself could not be doing what Elon Musk is doing in Washington today. He can't evaporate AID. He can't
Yeah,
nullify
I'm getting
the
there, Ab.
CFPB. He can't destroy an agency set up by us on a bipartisan basis in
If
Congress.
it's an unconstitutional
Nobody in the
agency,
executive branch
he
has
damn
that.
sure
Yeah,
can.
the
you
president is on top of the executive branch, but we're the
brainless
lawmaking
motherfucker.
power. And who sorts out the conflict if there's a conflict? The courts do. And what have the courts been saying? They've said a dozen times in 3 weeks that they're violating the Constitution of the
Yeah,
United States
leftist
and the
statist
laws
judges
passed by
who-
Congress.
who
That's what's
don't
going
respect
on
the very
in America
basic
today.
constitutional rights of
That's what
Americans
we
in the
should be
first
having
place.
a hearing about, not some airy academic conversation about the
She chugged
administrative
half the
state.
bottle.
Whatever
those
they mean
days.
by that. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back without objection. And all
The
the opening
gentleman
statements
yields
will be
back.
included in the record.
They got to
We'll
go by
now
rules of
introduce
decorum.
today's
There's no
witnesses.
way I
Dr.
could do it. I'd
Patrick
be like, well, that
McLaughlin.
prick, shut up.
Dr.
Next person.
McLaughlin is a research fellow at the Hoover Institution at Stanford University and a visiting research fellow at the Pacific Legal Foundation. He authored more than 30 peer-reviewed studies on a variety of topics, including regulatory economics, administrative law, and international trade. Mr. Patrick Smith. Mr. Smith is the Chief Executive Officer and founder of Axon Enterprise. Axon offers a variety of products
Turn the attic
services
into a bar when I
mostly
get to
law
the house.
enforcement and public safety entities. These
It is
products
always
and
good to
services
have
include
goals,
taser
Abby.
devices, body cameras, de-escalation training, and evidence management and reporting software.
I'm trying to talk over this so I can let it play because I have to get off
Ms.
when the wife
Wad
gets
is
home.
the co-founder and Prospera Africa,
Otherwise, she's going to
governance
drown me.
platform for special economic zones, and a senior fellow at
Basically-
the Atlas Network, an organization of African free market think tanks. She was named by Forbes
Or
as
two
being one of
bed,
the
one bath
20
apartments.
youngest power women in
Damn,
Africa.
Abby.
I get that right? A young global leader by the World Economic Forum, and is a
You have room
Global
to groove
Africa
in that
Fellow.
place then.
Professor Stephen Vladek. Mr. Vladek is the Agnes Williams Sesquicentennial Professor of Federal Courts at the Georgetown University Law Center. Professor Vladek focuses on federal courts, the Supreme Court, national security law.
You
and
found your
military
dad's
justice.
ex's
We welcome our
curse
witnesses
bag.
and thank them for appearing today. We will begin by swearing you in. Would you please rise and raise your right hand?
She's Wiccan and just left a curse bag there. That's a
You swear or
douchebag
affirm under
move.
penalty of perjury.
At least that's
that
what I'm
the
thinking when you
testimony
said
are
that.
about to give is true.
Either way, it's a
correct,
douchebag
to the
move.
best of your knowledge, information, and belief, so help you God. Let the record reflect that the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Thank you. Please be seated. And please know that your written testimony will be entered into the record in its entirety.
Ashes, herbs, and
Accordingly, we
bones.
ask that you summarize your testimony in
For
5
meals.
minutes.
Dr.
Dr. McLaughlin, you may begin.
Sounds like it, Ab.
Microphone.
You turn one of the rooms in our armory.
Thank you.
Abby,
Chairman Fitzgerald,
Sam
Ranking
has a
Member
good
Nadler,
point.
and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is
See,
Patrick
Abby's
McLaughlin, and I am a
already
research
on.
fellow with the
She's
Hoover
already got the game
Institution
plan,
and a
apparently.
visiting research fellow with the Pacific Legal Foundation. I appreciate the chance to discuss how regulatory reform can promote economic growth, encourage innovation, and reduce unnecessary burdens on businesses and consumers. Let's begin by acknowledging that regulations can play an essential role in achieving policy objectives such as protecting public health and the environment. But when regulations pile up over time without systematic review, this regulatory accumulation has costly consequences. Compliance becomes more complex, Businesses face mounting overhead costs, and entrepreneurs struggle to navigate the maze of over 1 million regulatory restrictions that are currently on the books.
Stupid. Yeah, well, she's from
Projects
California.
like
That
the Reg
explains
Data
everything.
Project, which uses AI to quantify various aspects of regulation and makes the data publicly available, have permitted economists to study the effects of
Oh, hey,
regulatory
one of you guys,
accumulation and
if
its
you
counterpart,
can, do
deregulation.
me a favor,
I'd
post
like to
John
review
Crump's
some of
live
those
in the chat.
findings today.
In case
First, I want
anybody
to
wants to bounce
emphasize the
over there.
magnitude of the economic
I would do
effects
it,
of
but I'm
regulatory
afraid it's going to
accumulation,
screw my
or the other
connection
side
up.
of the same coin, deregulation. In my written testimony, I cited a study that I co-authored, published
Because
in
him and
2020
Rich are
in
going
the
live
Economics
like
Journal
right now
Review
with
of Economic
Nat from
Dynamics.
Filibusters.
That study found that regulatory accumulation, the buildup of rules over time, distorts
I would
business
be over there,
investments,
but I want to do this. So
expenditures on
I'll
things
catch
like
up on theirs after a
research,
while. I'll watch the
development, new
replay.
machinery, and new buildings. These are the same activities that, in the
Comply
long
with
run, tend to
these
increase
nuts.
productivity and drive economic growth.
Absolutely.
We found that on average, federal regulatory accumulation slowed overall GDP growth by 0.8 of a percentage point. Considering GDP growth is in the US typically 2 to 3% annually, losing nearly 1 percentage point represents a massive loss. Other studies have found even larger effects. Second, I want to highlight the regressive effects of regulatory accumulation. Higher levels of regulation are associated with increased levels of poverty and income inequality.
Yes,
Specifically,
they
a
are.
10% increase in federal regulations is associated with a 2.5% increase in the poverty rate and a 4% increase in income inequality. When you dig a little deeper, it's easier to understand why. Regulations affect households directly in many ways, even when those regulations are targeted at businesses. For example, regulations typically increase the production cost of goods, and some of those costs are, of course, passed on to the consumer in the form of higher prices. One study found that a 10% increase in total regulation leads to a
Oh,
nearly
that's an absolute
1%
steal, Abby.
increase in consumer prices. Furthermore,
And if
the
you
study
can do a
found that
lot
the
of the
effects
work
of those price
yourself,
increases are regressive.
yeah,
That
you can
is,
fix
the
that
poorest
place
income
up
groups
however
experience
you
the
want.
highest
If you
proportional
wanted to,
increases in the prices they
take
pay.
2 of the units, 3 of
Regulations
the
also
units, turn
affect
them into your
households
own
by
place,
diminishing
rent
their
out 1
economic
unit.
opportunities.
You're in the
Multiple
game.
studies have found that higher levels of regulation are associated with fewer total firms and lower levels of employment. Finally, despite the fact that I'm an economist, I want to offer a positive message. We have seen that these negative effects caused by regulatory accumulation can be reversed. Several states and provinces of Canada have already begun the hard work of reassessing.
Dude, did you guys
existing
see
regulations
Canada
to
was
see
talking
which
about
ones
going to war
truly
with the
benefit
United
the public
States?
versus which ones are outdated,
This could get
redundant, or
fun.
impose costs that can't be justified by the benefits. By identifying and removing regulations that no longer serve their intended purpose, we can free up resources for more productive uses. Deregulatory efforts seem particularly
3 people that are
effective
coming with you?
when
Hell
coupled
yeah.
with tools like regulatory budgeting or sunsetting. The province of British Columbia, along with several other states, have experimented with tools like this. And in British Columbia, they were one of the first jurisdictions to use regulatory budgeting to deregulate. And they cut 40% of regulations in a 3-year period. And then they capped future regulatory growth.
Dude, when
with a
Trump came in his
one-in-one-out
first
type regulatory
administration
budget.
and
The
cut a
results
ton of
were a
regulations,
sustained boost to economic growth.
man, people don't
Recent studies
realize
found
the
that the
boost that
province's
had on
growth
the
rate
economy
increased by just
until
over 1
freaking
percentage
COVID.
point because of the deregulatory efforts. In closing, deregulation has the potential to invigorate the economy, spur innovation, and lessen the disproportionate burdens placed on smaller
Yeah, well,
firms and vulnerable
Canada
populations.
ain't got those kind of nuts anymore, Abby.
Thank you, and I look forward to answering any questions.
I understand
Thank you,
Canada
Dr.
did some
McLaughlin. Mr.
really
Smith, you
weird,
may
or
begin.
not weird, but
Thank you, Chairman
really
Fitzgerald, Ranking Member
pretty,
Nadler, and the entire
pretty bad
subcommittee
shit
for
in the
having me here
past,
today.
but
It's an honor. My name is
they
Rick
ain't got
Smith.
that nuts
I'm
anymore.
the CEO and founder
That's the only
of a company
reason
called
that their
Axon. We're an
freaking
American company in
dictator has
Arizona.
lasted up there as long as
Employs
he
over
has.
4,000 people today.
Good old
I
Justin
appreciate the opportunity to
Trudeau,
testify because the unchecked power
Castro's kid.
of the government led to serious consequences for my company, for my employees, and deeply for me
That's the
personally.
only reason that's the
No
only reason their
bureaucracy can be
citizens have
allowed to
rolled
act as
over
prosecutor, judge,
and been
jury
disarmed like they
without
have.
checks and balances and oversight. Many fine Americans work at the
Yeah,
FTC
well,
with the best of intentions.
Sam,
The
there's a
agency
lot
wields
more
unchecked
Americans that
powers
have them
in
nuts
ways
than
that can crush
Canadians.
innovation, stifle economic growth,
Just
and
saying.
deny basic constitutional rights.
We ain't
This
much
overreach
better,
was not the intention of our founders.
but we still have an
The work of this
overabundance of
committee is
rednecks.
critical to ensuring that all Americans do receive the due process protections they deserve and are guaranteed under the Constitution. I started Axon over 30 years ago in a garage with a dream to bring Captain Kirk's phaser to life, to provide a real alternative to deadly force. We can do better than bullets. When I first introduced taser technology, people laughed at the idea. No one thought they would work, except my dad.
Well,
He put in his
tasers
life
don't
savings.
work
I
most
nearly
of the
wiped
time.
him out. At the edge of losing everything, after 7 long years, we finally turned the corner. And today, you see our yellow
Now,
taser devices
I
on
have
almost every
literally
police officer
seen
in America.
people
They've
get
been deployed
tased
millions
and
of
it
times,
worked.
and together with the body-worn
perfectly.
cameras, another technology that we invented,
Dude locked
they're
up
used
like
across
a
the globe,
board.
from the London Met to Sydney, Australia. I've challenged my team to go further. We've published a public moonshot goal to cut gun deaths in policing 50% over a 10-year period. We believe we can do this through more effective,
Yeah,
less
Sam,
lethal
man.
alternatives and changing police
Having a
more
little bit of
advanced
land with a
VR training.
house,
These
in
aspirations and our
some ways,
mission
can be a lot
were
of work,
severely
but it's
disrupted when
worth
we
it.
came up against
It really
the
is.
unfettered power of the FTC.
I
In May
bet
of
the pay shit
2018,
sucks.
we acquired a small, failing body camera competitor. that was
Abby,
losing
would
$1
you
million
like to
a
tell the
month.
story in chat? 'Cause
Competitor
this
after
could be
competitor
awfully
passed
damn
on this
funny.
deal for 18 months.
Not
They
to
tried
say that
sell
I'm
the
laughing
company.
at your pain, but
We
I
were the
am.
buyer of last
Kinda,
resort.
sort of, maybe.
And we bought this
You're
money-losing
okay
company
now, so I get to laugh.
because it saved critical public safety agencies, including the NYPD, from serious disruptions if their body camera programs were
Currently
allowed
on
to
half
fail.
an acre.
The $13 million
Good deal.
price we paid was well below the legal threshold for FTC
That was
review.
that was the best thing me
What
and the wife
followed
did
was months of
when
requests
we
for
started looking
information,
for a place,
mountains of
looking for
legal
a place
filings,
to buy.
and a growing sense of
Was
disbelief
got a
that
place with some
this
land.
money-losing deal had drawn such a disproportionate government response.
It's
We
nice.
offered to write off our entire investment. In fact, we offered to put another $13 million in cash, effectively
It was a
doubling our
tasing
losses.
class. We all got
Shockingly,
tased.
we were told
Oh,
this was
that's
not
no
enough.
fun, Abby. I thought
The
it was a
FTC
good
demanded
story.
that we also hand over
Like
our
you
most
were like,
valuable assets.
you know,
First,
fighting
license
and the
all of our
cops got
intellectual property,
involved.
creating a full clone competitor.
Come on.
Then to hand over our most valuable customers to be chosen by the FTC. And most alarmingly, we were asked to write a blank check.
Gave up thinking you'll ever
This
have a
was
home. Sam, brother,
Such an outrageous request.
I
Our
was there
lawyers
for years,
said,
man.
hold on. Did you say
Of course,
blank
I
check?
gave up on getting
The
married.
government said, yes, you
kids
heard us
for
correctly. You
fucking
will write a
ever.
blank check. You will fund this new competitor
And then shit just
until we
flips,
tell
man.
you you are done. I learned that over the previous 20 years, the FTC had won 100% of cases in its in-house
Carry a
forums.
taser for a less
Over our dinner
less
table at
lethal
home, I shared
option.
this terrifying situation with my family. And my elementary school twins said, hey, Dad, we're learning about the Constitution. The Declaration
Never
of
been in a
Independence.
situation where you had to run from the
Callers
cops.
said the courts back then were
Oh,
beholden to the king.
good Lord,
So
Abby.
they
I
set
thought
up a
I
new
had a
country,
better
new
opinion of
constitution
you.
where the courts must be independent.
Just joking, just joking.
This is unconstitutional.
I've
You should sue
never
them. From the mouths of babes, I was like, wow, this is so
ran
clear
from the
and
cops
obvious.
outside
That
of
is what we must
roadblocks.
do. And so we preemptively sued the FTC in federal court, challenging their constitutionality.
Dude, Sam, I'm serious, brother. I was there for a long time. A long
In April
time.
2023, after 4 years of disruptions to our business, the Supreme Court ruled unanimously 9-0 in our favor, allowing our challenges to proceed in federal court. In response, the FTC
Hell, that's
dismissed
why I
its
didn't get
complaint
married
against
till I
us
was like
rather than defend its
36.
outrageous actions and demands against
Ron
us
Gun,
in
what's
front of
going
an
on, brother? How are you doing
federal
tonight?
Judge. As our 9-0 decision in the Supreme Court demonstrates, this is bigger than one company.
But that's also why I'm
or one
48
case.
and I've got an
Every American,
8-year-old
whether
and
an
a
individual, small
5-year-old.
or large
So,
corporation, should have the right
but
to
I
a
do
fair
highly
trial before an
recommend
independent
kids. They are
judge
an
before the
absolute
government can strip them of their livelihood,
Fluffy!
their property, or their rights.
My
It's the
brother,
bedrock
what is
principle of
up?
justice. Thank you for your
Hopefully
time.
you're doing
and I
well.
look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Ms. Wad, you can begin now.
Cold and wet. It's kind of wet here, but it ain't that cold, man. I got the window down, fan blowing,
Sorry.
feeling
Hear me
good.
now? All right, good. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for having me here and for the distinguished members of the committee for this opportunity to testify today. This matter is a personal matter to me.
Sheriff's words,
Why.
not yours.
My
Hey,
name is Magat Wade. I'm a Senegalese American
look,
entrepreneur.
as
I've
long as
been
they
in the
know the
US since
rules,
1998,
you're
and I
you're
became
golden.
a US citizen in 2018. I'm also an author
Cold,
of
wet,
The
and
Heart of a
slushy.
Cheetah, a book that talks about
Yeah, that's
African
one, man.
entrepreneurship and
It's
prosperity.
just kind of
It
drizzling
has
here,
been addressed.
kind of
It has been endorsed by Nobel
rain-ish.
laureate
But
Vernon Smith,
it's
development economist as Bill
I don't know,
Easterly,
hell, it's
and
got to
Whole
be
Foods founder John Mackey.
68 degrees at
I
least.
am a co-founder of Prosper Africa, an
36 here
initiative
in
that is
Reining.
out there to create
Yeah.
something similar to what you guys would
Yeah.
call here freedom cities.
We
in
might run
America.
into some more
And
36
I have been doing
degree
business,
days,
obviously,
maybe
both
in the next
Africa
little
as
bit,
in the
but
US,
right now
in the
we're
US, in the
we're
states
kicking
of
pretty good.
California, Texas,
Hell, the
and,
water temps
New York.
Sunday when me and Dad were out
Mr.
fishing,
Raskin, your words earlier
the
really,
water temp's
really
running
worried
about
me, and I will
56
tell you why.
degrees.
When you say we
So
are
it's
here
the
and we should be
fishing
here to
down
talk
here
about
is
Mr.
fixing
Elon
to
Musk
kick
and
off.
all the unconstitutional things that he's doing, and you said we
Oh yeah,
shouldn't be
dude, I
here to
wouldn't mess
talk
with
about
them either.
regulation or
But
anything like that. First of
as
all, I want to say, then
long as
why
they
did
know
you
the
have me
game and I know
here?
the game.
As an entrepreneur, my time is valuable. I came here because I thought we were going to talk about the regulatory state and why it
Got into a
matters.
bar fight.
So you need to make up your mind on that. And I'm deeply offended by what
Didn't
you said.
understand no means no.
And furthermore, I would tell you why I came when I was invited to speak on this. Because right now, everybody in this country, these issues of regulation, overregulation,
Hey,
has been made into a part.
if the
a matter
cop
of
knew you,
partisanship.
that
Are
came
you
down
from
on
the
your
left? Are
side,
you
but
from the right?
apparently,
I don't care. Because where I
if the
come
cops
from,
knew me, it wouldn't come down
the
on my side.
overregulation causes us to be where we
We
are.
got around 6
My
inches of
continent,
snow.
Africa, is the poorest region in the world today because it happens to be the
Oh,
most
dude, Fluff.
overregulated
Yeah,
region.
you guys get smoked
So
then.
if you don't see the value of overregulation, if you need and want to wait until this country becomes like most African countries, I don't know. I love this country and I don't want to see it go down there. So, and also, just so you know, what does overregulation mean for regular people? It means death, literally. People are packing themselves into little fishermen's boats, trying to leave nations that are overregulated, therefore no jobs, and then they have to leave and go seek jobs someplace else. By the way, English is only my fourth language, so when I trip on words, please excuse me, you all. So as a consequence of this perspective of mine, I'm aware of the fact that even in the US, it is difficult for a business person to be fully compliant with all the laws. In Senegal, I usually have to pay lawyers to make sure that I'm compliant all the way. It costs a lot of money and a lot of time and makes me very non-competitive. Everything I do.
Dude, if I wasn't married already, I'd propose to this chick, but she's already
There's no
married
sense
too,
in marriage.
apparently.
Anyone can call me a greedy business person. And yet most of us are subject to the potential of punitive power of a public official.
Yeah, I'd say that's a good reason to
I'm
break
very
someone's
familiar
nose, Ab.
with the many informal small businesses that are run by other Africans in the US. Of course, the biggest one of them, for me at least, is occupational license. You see this hair of mine, the lady who breeds it. Most of the time it's gonna be an immigrant lady who got here. She's not doing anything criminal or anything like that, but her business is gonna be illegal because of all the laws and the licenses she has to get in order to do
This
something
chick
that she
is
learned to
on
do since she was 12
point.
back home. And here she's here sustaining herself, not touching the wealth or anything like that. This is paying her bills and the bills of her children and the people that she had left home. So then what? Are we people that should be penalized? Should those people be penalized? I don't think so. To take a different issue, Austin, where I live right now, the housing prices were rapidly rising due to excessive land use regulations until recently. Last year, I testified for the Texans for reasonable solutions to deregulate land use regulations, and they've made really great progress in reducing the growth in housing costs. We estimate that there's between 30 to 40% of the housing costs that are due to excessive regulations in some areas. When I moved to the US, I lived in San Francisco. I loved that city. Yet I can't live in that city anymore for what that city has become, and it primarily has to do with the high cost of housing due to the regulations. Take another example. My husband is an education entrepreneur who was a leader in the micro school space before it became a thing. If you want a new renaissance in education, you need to minimize the regulations pertaining to new school creation so smaller education entrepreneurs can also get in the game and challenge the status quo. I ask again, do we really want to be penalizing these entrepreneurial educators?
Ms. Wad, your
Yes.
time is
I'm gonna-
expired. We're gonna have some follow-up questions, obviously, though, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Professor Vladeck, your recommendation.
Dude, I'd have let that chick run on till the end of her
Thank you for
statement
the
without
opportunity to testify
question.
this morning. I must confess to at least a modicum of surprise that of all the topics for this subcommittee to investigate at this moment in American history, it has picked this one. Certainly, we can all agree that one of Congress's and this committee's most important constitutional functions is holding the executive branch to account. I would thus happily celebrate, if not affirmatively endorse, well-conceived efforts to rein in the executive branch, especially in response to specific abuses of existing statutory and constitutional arrangements, perhaps like the ones summarized by my fellow witnesses. But given what has transpired over the first 3 weeks of the new administration,
had no common sense.
Legislation being discussed this morning, and not on what is happening across this city and across this country, as we sit here today, strikes me as far more than just a missed opportunity. Indeed, if this committee was genuinely interested in reining in abuses by the executive branch, it strikes me that there are at least 4 distinct and far more pressing areas to which it should focus its attention. First, the first 3 weeks of the second Trump administration has witnessed a more systemic and sustained assault on Congress's constitutional primacy with respect to appropriations.
So, yeah, this is the dude who brushes his teeth.
It would take more time than I have this morning to list all of the examples. But we're seeing the executive branch repeatedly violate clear statutory spending requirements and prohibitions, whether under the Impoundment Control Act, various statutes setting up and funding the USAID, NIH appropriations riders, or otherwise. The Constitution is unusually clear about appropriations, Mr. Chairman. Contrary to the comments made by Chairman Cole last week, these statutes are all laws that have binding teeth for purposes of the Supremacy Clause. Indeed, uniquely with respect to appropriations, the Constitution expressly requires that Congress play the primary role.
I've broken knuckle hitting the dude.
These areas, then, the executive branch is not just breaking the law; it is
phones in the face are a little hard.
Single most important policymaking power. Second, we've also seen unprecedented efforts by the president to assert control over the entire bureaucracy, and quite overtly to do so in the name of loyalty to the president rather than fidelity to the Constitution. Third, and speaking of unprecedented, we've seen the president use the guise of an office located within the executive branch to take unitary control over virtually all of the federal government spending and personnel management functions, again, apparently in violation of—
How dare you cut out the fraud?
Limiting who may have access to those systems and for which purposes.
Hold on.
Finally, I'd be
Let's
remiss
do this real fast.
Noting the various actions this administration's undertaken.
Let me pause and let me do this. Where am I at? I'm gonna turn my camera on for a second. So let me explain this to the class here. There's a couple different reasons Democrats are pissed that this fraud is being called out. One of the reasons is because the Democrat Party and a lot of Democrat politicians, are getting a lot of money from USAID. Now, it's not direct. They funnel this through organizations. USAID gives money to the Tidewater Foundation. Tidewater Foundation donates to organizations like Black Lives Matter, Act Blue, and Black Lives Matter and Act Blue donate to these Democrats in their campaigns, and that money gets funneled into their pockets. So Democrats, and some Republicans right now are pissed that their money printer is getting shut down. So that's why you hear all these. Sorry, hands still dirty from work. I came right in and started this. So that's why they're all pissed off about this. Never mind the fact that USAID, and this is a funny little quirk of things. So the CIA is technically not allowed to spend money to do operations in the United States, and they don't. But what they do is they funnel money through USAID to fund groups like Black Lives Matter and Antifa and all these other groups that are out there running in the streets with their paid protesters, causing all sorts of damn chaos. And it is all just to keep the chaos going. It's all to keep people like us from actually seeing what the government's doing and getting on the same page and voting the same way. Almost all Democrats are statist leftists. All right. Some Republicans are statist. They will do anything to support the government cause. Those are the people who are getting this money funneled to them. So they are really pissed that Elon's out there breaking this stuff down. Wait till the audit hits the Pentagon. That's going to be lit as fuck when it hits the Pentagon too. Guy apparently enjoys the taste. Yeah, he does. He enjoys the taste of liberal shoe leather, like a lot. He doesn't chew bubble gum. He definitely chews fucking government boot leather. It's funny, all the stuff that USAID and a lot of these organizations are involved in. All this stuff getting called out. We knew, a lot of us knew they were doing this shit in the first place. We knew it. You kind of knew what the government was doing with the money. Now it's all getting called out. It's on paper. We can see where the money's going. It is documented. That's also why these leftist judges and these statist judges want Elon and them to destroy all of the data they've collected so far, because they want to bury that shit. All right. So anyway, there's a ton of rabbit holes I could jump down on that. Let's get back to this hearing, because I love hearing Democrats cry. It's kind of a sweet tooth. All right, let's get back to the screen share. Let me shut my camera down. Let's get back to the screen share, because some of this is just too fucking good.
Against private persons that flatly contravene existing statutory and constitutional protections, such as the attempt to narrow the scope of birthright citizenship, a right protected not only by the 14th Amendment, but by a statute Congress enacted in 1940.
Birthright citizenship was never supposed to be,
I suspect the point has been
for
made.
any
in 3
kid
weeks,
born
we have
on
seen
American
a more sustained
soil.
assault by the president on
And they
this
know.
institution's constitutional prerogatives than we've seen in the first 250 years of our republic. To be sure, we've also seen the federal courts pushing back against these abuses, in many cases aggressively, but the courts can't and shouldn't be expected to go it alone.
Why do I look at this guy
Some
and the
have
only
tried to
name I can
defend this
think of
rash
is
of unlawful
Poindexter?
behavior on the ground that the executive branch is rooting out fraud and other abuses. Of course, if that were actually the goal, we should have expected some discussion of the Department of
I
Defense.
guarantee you
At a
his
more
wife
basic
has
level,
a
this committee
boyfriend.
and Congress as a whole
If he has a
has
wife.
spent much of the last 160 years setting up sophisticated, accountable inter-branch mechanisms
Watch
for
Days
holding the
Redacted.
executive branch to account in precisely these spaces. It's not like fraud, waste, and abuse
something
became problems
gross.
only over the last 4 years. That includes inspectors general. It
Talked
includes
about being
DOJ offices
careful.
designed to root out corruption and others. Rather than lean into those checks, the president's response has been to fire most of the inspectors general.
Yeah, I mean, definitely got to be
and the head of the
careful
government
with
agency that protects whistleblowers.
letting
Maybe
things
there's
go
an
too
argument
far
this
to
is
that
good
end.
policy.
Where
I'm skeptical.
we already
That's
have
an
a
argument that should be
surveillance
made to this
We're
body in its
already under.
consideration of new legislation, not through
we
repeated
don't
assertions
do
of executive
anything
freedom.
electronically in
The result of the
what
executive's assertion of authority and Congress's
90% of our
abdication of
life roughly
responsibility has
is
been not just an unprecedented
has
breakdown
an
in the separation of
electronic
powers,
footprint.
but a
All
growing
that
and
data is
seemingly
already
unending
collected.
list of negative real-world
They've had
impacts
to
on
admit that
everyday
in
people
congressional
who may
hearings.
no longer
All
have
that
access to
information is already
experimental
collected.
medication, who may no longer receive timely storm warnings, who may no longer be able to receive the government-subsidized health care Congress has provided for more than 60 years, and so on.
Biometric border.
Even farmers who
Yeah,
sign
have
contracts
fun
with
with
the
that shit.
USDA to be
I say we
reimbursed for
just dig a
modernizing their
moat, throw
infrastructure with
crocodiles in it,
guarantees that the federal
landmine the
government will
rest of
cover
it,
part of
and
their
then see what
costs,
happens.
are now on the hook for expenses they can't afford and
And
projects
yeah,
they can't complete.
that whole definitely
Everywhere
goes
you
deep.
look,
Gabe,
there are
I can't
stories like
remember
this
whether
one.
I said hi
This
to
is
you,
not
brother.
just an administrative law crisis,
Hopefully
Mr.
you're
Chairman.
doing
It is
well.
a government credibility and credit crisis. Against that backdrop, it strikes me as more than a little ironic that this committee believes the most important thing it can and should be discussing today is whether to enact the legislation being proposed. It seems to me instead that these topics deserve more of our attention.
The
and I would look
14th
forward to
Amendment was
participating in those
explained
discussions.
by
But
the
having this
writers of
hearing
the
sends
14th
exactly the
Amendment.
wrong message about the
It
institutional
wasn't
autonomy,
supposed to be
constitutional
for
authority,
anybody born in the
and
United
democratic
States
responsibility of the
to
legislature,
be a
the
United
branch
States
of the
citizen.
government that the Constitution quite deliberately
It was never supposed to be
Thank you,
about
Mr.
that.
Vladeck, Professor Vladeck. We'll proceed now under the 5-minute rule with some questions. I'm going to recognize myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Smith,
I promise you, the Democrats in this hearing are
testimony,
solid fucking
Exxon
gold.
spent approximately $20 million defending its acquisition of VView against the FTC.
The Republicans, and even him now,
which
I
was
got to
more
shut up
than the
because
acquisition price itself, I guess.
he's throwing out
the way
some
you
good stuff.
described it. But you were willing to spend that money because you believe that every American has the right to due process. So Why is due process so important to you as a business owner, having lived through it and experienced it the way you have?
This may seem cliche, but it's more important to me as an American. And I hear the passion in people's voices. There are many things we can disagree on, but I think progress can happen when we can find bedrock principles that we all agree on. The systems of checks and balances, for example, is so critical to a functioning democracy. And what I came to understand with the FTC was, in fact, there is a system that has gotten out of balance, where there is no check
Way
and
out of balance.
where there is no independent judiciary, where that agency can act as judge, jury, and prosecutor. And they presented me with a situation where they either threatened me to go into court, where there was a 0% chance over 20 years of having a fair trial where I could win, or to effectively seize my company's most valuable assets, give us an unlimited liability, and place all my 4,000 employees and all of our customers at risk. And so that's why I'm here today, as I'm now very passionate about this. I was disappointed when the FTC dropped their case against us because I felt the system was so unfair. I wanted to see it make its way back up to the Supreme Court. But when they dismissed their case, I jumped at the chance to come and testify before Congress today, because together we have an opportunity to fix the checks and balance by just simply having independent judges review every case when the government is going after an American.
Very good. Dr. McLaughlin, in a lawsuit challenging the FTC's pre-merger notification rule, business groups claim that the FTC's rule will cost over 7 times the amount that the FTC estimated in its final rule. This is kind of a consistent problem that we see. And the FTC estimates that it will cost billions. The FTC has not articulated how it will use the information to better enforce the antitrust laws. And the FTC has never articulated past examples of missed enforcement that would justify the rule. Is this type of potentially burdensome regulation that Congress, we should sit down and analyze this and potentially act on it?
Thank you. So you're referring to the new HSR rules, of course, and I did take a look at those as a reference point. The paperwork burden estimate from the FTC may indeed be low compared to what other people estimate it to be. I think it's worth pointing out that those estimates, similar to what Mr. Smith is pointing out, are produced by the same people who want to produce the rule. So maybe there's a conflict of interest there. But I would also point out that even though that paperwork burden may be what the FTC estimated or maybe 7 times larger, it still is very small compared to the overall burden of regulation. And that's my main point here. The big burden here is the totality of regulation, much more than any individual rule's consequence.
Right. Let me just follow that up. So the Separation of Powers Restoration Act, or SOPRA,
Dude,
would enshrine.
are we getting some weird feedback on the?
And clarify other differences that have allowed agencies to act.
Hold on, guys, because
formal legislative bodies. So, and the key point is probably that SOPRA would require judges to conduct de novo review of agency statutes, the regs, the guidance documents. Can you talk about how enshrining judicial review in law may slow the pace of regulations for administrative agencies?
I think it would.
I don't know what that noise.
Leaving some percentage of rules.
Yeah, I don't know what that noise was. I was kind of monitoring through my phone. I don't know what the hell it was
anymore. No judicial deference of any sort that they can rely upon to push a rule forward. So some percentage of rules will probably just not get pushed forward at all.
I'm sorry, guys, for that feedback. I have no idea what the hell it was.
Stood up because of the different deference documents. What percentage that will be, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the delaying factor is built into the system, which could actually, I think, assist Congress in having the time to
examine. Yeah, I got my phone sitting here, and I got the audio low on it, and all of a sudden I started hearing that freaking squeak, and it was like, what the hell?
Yeah, and there's going to be plenty of room, hopefully, in different reforms for Congress to play a more active role. And I think that my research in the area has shown it's necessary for another.
I'm sorry for that. It had to be hell on wheels for you guys. I got my phone low, and that shit was
coming out of the
freaking
agencies.
Killing me.
Now recognize the ranking member for 5 minutes.
Oh, here we go.
Thank you,
This
Mr.
one's going to be
Chairman.
fun.
Professor Vladeck, while the Republican majorities in the House and Senate stand aside and do nothing to stop the Trump administration's incursions on congressional authority, The courts have begun to step in and block some of these unlawful actions. But not content merely to
Yeah,
undermine
almost.
congressional authority.
From what
in the
little I
face
could
of
hear
these
on my
court
phone, because like I
decisions,
said, I
senior
got my phone
administration officials
low.
have
But
now
yeah,
tried to
it
question
sounded like
the
one. But
legitimacy of the
I ain't
courts
got no smoke
themselves.
detectors going
For
off.
example, in response to a court order blocking Elon
Rookie
Musk from
streamer, I am. You
accessing
guys know it's
sensitive
always a
Treasury
shit
Department
show,
data,
Fluffy.
Musk said that the judge who made the ruling, quote, needs to be
You got a
impeached.
country
Now,
ass connection
Vice
that's
President
liable to
J.D.
drop
Vance
out at any
stated that,
second.
quote,
And apparently,
judges
ghosts in
aren't
the
allowed to
stream.
control the executive's legitimate power. President Trump said, quote, no judge should frankly be allowed to make that kind of decision. It's a disgrace. The White House called the judgment absurd and judicial overreach. And now these vague threats to judicial independence have seemingly crossed the line into actual defiance of a court order. Yesterday, a federal judge in Rhode Island ruled that the White House had defied his order to unfreeze billions of dollars in federal grants. Can you describe the constitutional crisis we would face if the Trump administration continues to ignore valid court orders?
Okay, so I got to pause it here because just damn, I'm going to try to let this play and just kind of talk through it. But I told my dad we were out fishing Sunday on the river, trying to catch some stripes from white bass. Like when they threatened Elon and everybody at Doge over there at the freaking USAID building, Trump should just post the fucking 82nd Airborne up around that building with freaking M2 machine guns everywhere and dare that judge to send law enforcement to go shut them down. And if law enforcement dare shows up, just blow the fucking vehicles right out from underneath them. This is an unconstitutional agency that is unconstitutionally just wasting our tax dollars on coups and all sorts of just social manipulation. And these pieces of absolute human shit are defending this because I guarantee you, all that old Jerry Nadler, he's getting money from them. It may be funneled through 3 different organizations, but Jerry's getting his pockets padded by him. So it's, how should I put this? I'm struggling with it a little bit because I'm trying not to just absolutely snap. But here's one. So again, talking to my dad the other day. All of these Congress people should have to get physicals like a DOT certified driver does every single year. These sons of bitches should be drug tested every month, and they should be audited every single year. If they have investments when they get elected, all of their investments should be frozen. In other words, if they had a IRA or something, they can't buy and sell stocks. Whatever they're invested in, whatever their stocks are basically locked in when they go into government service. So there is no put it in a blind trust, call the dude to tell another dude to sell a stock, buy a stock. Nope. Whatever you're invested in is what you're invested in. You don't get to change your investments the entire time you're in Congress. If you are so-called sacrificing for public service, your shit's locked in. You don't get to change your investments until you get your happy ass out of office. Then you can go back to being a private citizen. But as long as you're in government, your shit's locked in. Period. End of story. Have fun with it. The salaries in Congress. This is Coops fixes to retardation in government. The salaries in Congress, whether it's a senator, whether it's a Congress member in the House, all right, your salary is based on the median salary in the district you represent. So if the median salary in your district is $60K, that's what you get. Now, I know some districts will make more. People who represent districts in California and New York and some other places, yeah, they'll be making more money. We cap their salaries at, say, 200. So you can't make any more than that. That's what your salary is. Get over it. The point being behind that is if you want a raise as a member of Congress, the only way you get a raise is if you get your fucking districts a raise. If you get your people that you're supposedly representing a raise, then you get a raise. Your happy ass ought to be sitting in your district in an office accessible to the public no less than 6 months out of the year. You don't get to fly back and forth to Washington every fucking weekend. We don't need that many goddamn laws. We honestly don't. You are accessible to the people you represent. Anybody can walk in your office at any given time. At best, you have a sheriff posted out front and a metal detector to screen people before they can walk right in your office, look you in the face, and tell you you're a sack of shit or tell you you're doing a great job. You're not insulated from the people you represent. So, all right, so let me get back to this. That's Coops' rant. Sorry, had to.
Sure. I think, Congressman, we've never seen a crisis quite of that scope. I mean, the famous quote about Andrew Jackson and John Marshall is apocryphal. Andrew Jackson actually did not frustrate the Supreme Court's decision in Worcester versus Georgia. The only example we have of a president ever openly defying a decision by a justice was Lincoln at the outset of the Civil War, refusing to comply with the
Biden not
issued by Chief Justice Taney by himself, not by the full Supreme Court. We've never seen a president who said, okay, the Supreme Court has told me I have to stop doing something. I'm going to keep doing it. And I think the critical
Biden did it with the student loan stuff.
Breakdown, Congressman, not just in the rule of law and the separation of powers. We'd have a breakdown.
Could you
in the
throw
courts
the
executive
government
depends upon the courts
pecker any deeper
to prosecute crimes, to bring civil enforcement action? So I think, you know, the point of no return.
Told you I was in the mood, guys.
The courts are no longer willing to even do the executive branch's regular business because the executive branch won't abide by the court's judgments.
They would make a company that does that for them.
Briefly describe 4 areas of this.
They could. There's ways around anything. Yeah, Sam, they could still line their pockets. I'm just saying we make that shit as hard on them as possible.
Reverse order. Can you please
Sister
elaborate
California Ford, what's up?
Sure,
How are you doing today?
This
Hope
committee,
you're doing well.
both historically and currently, has both the
You work
power and
tonight?
the mandate.
Well,
to
have a
engage
good
in
night at work,
rigorous
chick.
oversight of what the Department of Justice specifically is doing.
Be
How the
safe.
executive branch is
Have a
complying or
great
not
night.
complying with the various statutes.
Hopefully you're
of the firings of inspectors general, of the firing of the special counsel.
dealings with
Hampton Bellinger,
retards are
who's the
really
chief
low.
the
How about
head of the whistleblowing agency within the federal government. This committee has the power, of course, to consider whether legislation should be proposed, to rein in some of these claims, to backstop existing statutes, or perhaps even if the majority is so inclined to authorize what the president is doing. But the point, I think, Congressman, is that what we have seen over the first 3 weeks is the president suggesting that this committee and all of Congress is completely unnecessary for him to do what he wants to do. And so whether it's through oversight hearings, whether it's
what
through
he's
withholding
saying is you
legislation, whether it's through
assholes
passing
haven't done your
legislation,
jobs
whether it's through the bully
forever.
pulpit that members of this committee on both sides are so skilled at using, it seems like there is a much more important story to tell about what is happening right now to the separation of powers in this country than the admittedly important stories of my fellow witnesses. Those are all problems, but what we're seeing is a structural attempt to reallocate
Came
power
to the job to
likes of
interview
which
the
we've never
homeless.
seen before, and that's where I think this committee has.
I bet you that was a fun one, Callie.
Mr. Smith,
You're gonna get you some sleep, sis. Take it easy. Get you some good sleep.
Administration to skirt court orders. Does the independent judiciary really function?
So I guess I am one congressman who still thinks that the line is holding. We have more examples historically of what I would call slow walking compliance with court orders by the executive branch, the likes of which seems to be happening right now. I would not
Workday's about over.
Put it past the possibility.
Good deal,
part
brother.
of the lack of compliance we're seeing is because of incompetence, not malice. And so it seems to me that we are not at the point yet where the executive branch is affirmatively refusing to comply with federal court orders.
And if we get to that point,
Company won't
I
get
think it would be
clients.
incumbent upon this committee to pursue articles of impeachment. And I would hope that there would be sufficient members of the majority.
All right,
who think
Sister
that was
Ford, you
part of their
take it easy,
constitutional
chick.
Responsibility that the politics of the moment would give way to the politics of our constitutional order.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman's time is
Thank
expired.
you, Professor. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman's time is expired. Now
Yeah, this
recognize
guy's
the
a
gentlewoman from
professor.
Wyoming for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I guess I would take your testimony a bit more seriously, Mr. Vladeck, if you actually had ever complained or shown any light on the Biden administration's efforts to forgive the student loans in violation of the law and court order. Ms. Wade, I appreciate your passion for this issue. It is something that is incredibly significant, and I think the caterwauling that you hear on the other side is what happens
Boy,
when
Hagman
you
is just a
light on
freaking
the scurry
monster in
little
these
things
hearings.
that
I
live
love
under
her.
most rocks that most of us find rather disgusting. The 2024 version of CEI's 10,000 Commandments found that federal regulations, total compliance costs, and economic effects are at least $2.117 trillion annually. U.S. households pay an average of $15,788,000 annually in a hidden tax, which consumes 17% of income and 22% of household expenses. The Biden-Harris administration
That is
imposed over
massive.
$1.7 trillion in cumulative regulatory costs on the economy, surpassing all predecessors. The issue of overregulation in this country is absolutely real, and it is people like you that are affected, regardless of whether Mr. Vladeck feels that you should have a voice in these proceedings. Mr. Smith, I want to turn to you because I think people need to understand what ALJs, administrative law judges, and administrative law courts actually do in this system. If you want to talk about unconstitutionality, Article 3 establishes an independent judiciary to protect citizens from loss of life, liberty, and property without due process of law. Over the last 50 years or so, a variety of federal agencies have created their own court systems led by administrative law judges. It would come as
Even
no
with the
surprise to
judges,
no one that agencies enjoy outside
they don't want
success
to uphold your
in
constitutional
proceedings
rights
before these ALJs.
80% of the
After
time.
all, they're wearing the same jerseys. They're on the same team. In Article 3 courts, as provided by the Constitution, the SEC only wins about 58% of its cases. And between fiscal year 2011 and 2014, the SEC, however, won an average of 90% of its cases in front of ALJs. The FTC, who you went up against, wins not over 90% of its cases before its own ALJs. Yet Lena Khan, who was the head of the FTC under the last administration, lost almost every single case she ever brought before an Article 3 case or an Article 3 court. When Axon was forced into the FTC Administrative Law Court, or ALC, proceedings, were you provided with the same protections and rights you would expect in an Article 3 court, such as due process, the right to a trial by jury, that sort of thing?
Absolutely not. No, it was a foregone conclusion. Frankly, it was described to me by my attorneys as hopeless. There was a 0% chance over the previous 20 years of getting a fair trial. And even once we came out, if it went to appeal, the appellate process would be only reviewing the FTC's version of events. They get to write the entire record, and you never get a day in court. Maybe you get an appellate review to see if they made an error in the law, but we would never have gotten a chance for an independent arbiter to hear our claims.
I would think that the people on the other side of Mr. Vladeck would be concerned about the violation of constitutional rights that you just described, but apparently they're more concerned about protecting the unelected bureaucrats and their ability to send millions of dollars to things that we don't want to pay for, such as trans comic books for people in Peru. The FTC enjoys over 90% success rate in proceedings before the ALJs, as we just talked about. And what I understand is that you were forced to spend $20 million defending yourself in these FTC proceedings. Having been an administrative law attorney for many years, I describe this as the process is the punishment. Would you agree?
Absolutely what it is.
The process was a heck of a lot of punishment. However, it was nowhere near what was being threatened. I mean, for a $13 million acquisition, the government was basically looking to seize $1 billion worth of intellectual property. as well as half our customers, and an unlimited liability. So the process was terrible, but we had to go through it because the alternative was even worse.
As you likely know, in this Congress, I have introduced the Seventh Amendment Restoration Act, which provides Americans with the right to remove their cases before an ALJ to an Article III district court. Do you think that that is something that would have helped you in pushing back and fighting back against the FTC in these horrific proceedings?
I have to say that that proposal is beautiful in its simplicity, and I think it actually would fit what we've all talked about, the system of checks and balances functioning properly, that an American should be able to say, my goodness, if I have the government coming after me, may I please have an independent judge where I can plead my case and have a chance of prevailing.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Thank you, Ms. Wade. Thank you, Dr. McLaughlin, for being willing to come here and expose this horrific situation, this horrific administrative situation that we're dealing with. I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. We now recognize the gentleman from Maryland, the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Raskin.
What you want to bet he talks more about Elon?
In just the last 22 days, which seems at this point like 22 months, they've sacked 17 inspector generals, the major corruption fighters in federal agencies. They've illegally tried to freeze government spending that has been appropriated by the Congress of the United States. They've fired heads of 4 independent agencies, and they've shut down work completely, at least 4 agencies, paying thousands and thousands of federal workers to do nothing because they want to try to bring the work of the federal government that doesn't directly profit them to a screeching halt. Meanwhile, Musk and his completely unvetted and untrained night crew of assistants have gained access to at least 18 federal agencies, stolen reams of the American people's data from the agencies, and fired thousands of workers in violation of civil service due process, trampling all of the checks and balances and rights to individual adjudication that Mr. Smith just referred to. All of these actions,
they're government
employees,
employees,
but it's the data grab that is rocking the American people right now. The capture of this data represents an unprecedented hack into our most sensitive information. And a profound risk it is for all Americans.
They have
Musk and his
the authority and the passwords and all the access information.
Sensitive and confidential
That's not a
data sets.
hack.
Some of them might include
You're a
classified
political
information,
hack.
for all we know, in order to root out fraud. How do we actually root out fraud in the government?
So historically, Congressman, as you know, the way that we root out fraud is through a series of overlapping and interlocking mechanisms. The inspectors general are the first line of defense within the agencies. The idea is that their job is to provide regular audits of what the agency is doing. As you know, there are various statutes.
And they haven't been doing their job
to
for
investigate
decades.
fraud and to make claims against the government when they think there is fraud. The False Claims Act at the top of that list.
It's just like
And then,
asking
Congressman, there's
bank
this committee,
robbers to
and
police
there's its companion
themselves.
committee in the Senate that use its oversight functions to ensure that the government is complying with its statutory obligations. Its obligations, Congressman, to investigate fraud in all of its spaces.
Well, to illegally wipe out all these inspectors general, and it was in direct and admitted violation of the federal statute, which says that
No,
the
it
president
wasn't.
has to come to Congress first and set forth the rationale for why they're being fired 30 days before it happens. But in doing that, what will the effect be on actually trying to root out waste, corruption, fraud, self-dealing in the agencies?
So I think the reality is that you're going to have a split between fraud, waste, and corruption that has no coordination, that has no involvement from senior officials in the agency, which I suspect the agencies might still have some interest in going after, and fraud, waste, corruption, and abuse that the senior officials in the agency are aware of because now they're the only people in a position to do anything about it. The reason why Congress historically separated the function of the heads of agencies from the inspector general is so that the inspector general would be in a position to review even the senior leadership of agencies when it came to these concerns. That's the biggest thing you lose when you fire all
right, so if they're undermining the infrastructure that's set up to actually try to target fraud and waste and abuse, why are they accessing all of the data of the American people?
I mean, I think that's a question this committee ought to ask them, Congressman. But I'll just say, and I think this is an important point, we can all surely agree that rooting out fraud, waste, and abuse in the executive branch is actually a noble goal, and it's a goal that we should all be invested in. But the way to do it is to either, one, use existing mechanisms, or two, come to this body, Congress, this committee, and suggest why the existing mechanisms need to be reformed, as opposed to starting from scratch.
Well, Elon Musk is the wealthiest person on earth, or at least he was before the collapse of Tesla in Europe recently, but he's a very wealthy man. Could he benefit financially from accessing all of the data in the United States Department of Treasury computers?
I mean, I would think anyone who has contracts with the United States and with other governments would benefit from having access to that information.
A federal judge in New York just ordered Musk to destroy the data they had illegally obtained from the Treasury Department. This is the judge they're all now talking about impeaching. Who can ensure that Musk has followed the order of the court and destroyed this data?
I mean, it seems to me that there are two possibilities, Congressman. The courts are first, and I think Congress and this committee in particular are second.
We're reading reports that Musk has fed Americans' data, private data, into AI models. And he's also making a bid for another company in artificial intelligence, just going ahead and doing his business while he's purporting to do the business of the American people. What dangers are posed by the feeding of our data into an AI system, if that were to happen?
I mean, I think there are multiple levels of danger, and I know that the time is expiring. I'll just say that I think the most obvious dangers are the possibility that this data will become accessible, not just to our government operations, but to our enemies overseas, and they'll use that for malicious purposes.
Gentleman's time has expired. Now,
You know how much data our government just
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank
exploits
all
of
you on the,
ours and leaves
panel for
open to other
sharing
countries
today. I
every
want to speak to
single
Ms. Watt
day?
for just a moment. In your testimony, you explained how the regulations in New York and California made it difficult for your businesses to flourish, so you moved to Austin, Texas. Just want to give you an opportunity, and I appreciate you coming and sharing today. Was there a specific moment when you realized you needed to move your business to a more business-friendly state?
Thank you for the opportunity. Yes, it started when I was in California, because first I was in California, then New York, then Austin. It started when I was in California, and when the cost of, and you see, this is where, when people ask, what was it a special thing? It was not a special thing. You know, it's one of those things, it's death by 1,000 cuts, literally. I mean, what people don't realize is we've got millions and millions and millions of lines of code. Each law, each regulation is a line of code. And to be compliant, it's almost impossible. I know that every day I'm probably violating the, you know, the 3 violations a day thing that people talk about. I know. And if I had some opponents, they could look easily into my 4 businesses or the nonprofits that I have, and they will find something. Not because I was being facetious, not because I wanted to be against the law, but because the law is so darn complicated that you're bound to make mistakes. Even if you have lawyers and attorneys, it happens all the time. So at some point,
Happens
after going
single
through California, I
day
eventually went
with
to
FFLs.
New York. New York was no better. Actually, I would argue, yeah, it was definitely no better. And I had to look around and really now take it seriously, the ranking of the most free states in the country. And eventually that's when I how I landed in Austin, in Texas, literally.
Well, although you have 50 state regulatory environments to choose from, you're still subject to the federal regulations wherever you go in the United States. And despite the improvements in your business since the move to Austin, what challenges would you share with us still persist even at the federal level?
Again, I get that question even about Africa. What would you address? And I'd say to people, by now, things have gotten so bad, Representative, that if you want to hear the truth from me, I believe that the best thing that it's not so, for me, it's no longer about talking about what the Fed has done wrong. It's about talking about what could they do right going forward. And going forward, I would argue that the House is so fine for competitive jurisdictions. And, you know, we've been eating away at that. And now there's cumbersomeness everywhere. So zones that we call them, in my case, Prospera zones, which is, that is what I'm doing in Africa. Because in Africa, we have a worse case situation than even the US. And the best way to do this is to basically, at the federal level, can we find zones where we apply—
Just, what's up, brother, man? How you doing?
All the commercial laws and have a chance to start fresh. That's really what I'm advocating for at the federal level in the United States today. So let us create these zones where we can actually start fresh and create areas where we have new miracles of growth that can happen.
Hey,
Now, let
again, while I'm
Texas
thinking
compete
about
with
it,
these
you
zones.
guys have
I
got
think it's going to
channels.
be the
Throw your
fastest way to
channels
clean
out in the
things up,
chat.
because otherwise we're just going to be sitting here in these circles complaining all day long about this law here, that law here, which I would argue
That's
that's
why
nothing.
you guys
So
got
at this point, we've
wrenches.
got to be radical, we've got to be bold, because if something is not done
I can't
quickly,
believe Ford hadn't got
radically,
a wrench yet.
I'm afraid, Mr. Raskin, soon
I
you're
gotta
not going
make
to have
sure
the
I
United
give her
States
a
of
wrench
America to
before we
speak
get
of.
out of here.
The only reason why we speak of the United States of America anywhere is because of the power of the U.S. Power of the U.S. because of economic power of the U.S. If the U.S. keep going down
Brother,
this
what is
path
going
of
on?
overregulation, this country will be poor, and poor nations have no say. So that would be what I recommend. If we continue down this path, if we don't do anything, this country might not be spoken about in a few
Agreed.
years.
Unfortunately, our government today is a far cry from what our founders intended. Today, unelected bureaucrats are some of the biggest spenders in Washington.
Making the kids
Congress
dinner.
has got to take
Yeah,
back
brother,
the
I'm
power of
fixing to
the
start
purse
making dinner
common
here in
sense
just a minute.
regulatory reforms.
I feel
The
that.
REINS Act requires congressional approval of any federal agency rule with an impact of $100 million or more before they take effect.
Next one, hey,
Dr.
dude, if you
McLaughlin,
got your
I want to ask
channel
you,
name and
in
stuff
your
already
view,
and
would
got it made, dude,
implementing the
go ahead and
REINS
post
Act
it.
bring Congress more in
We'll get
line
you
with
some,
what
we'll
the
get you
drafters of the
whoever's in the
Constitution
chat,
intended?
man. We'll hit you up.
Yes, it would. Ultimately, regulations stem from congressional authority, and the REINS Act lines up with that line of thinking.
And in your research and a lot of things you've spoken about the economic impact of federal regulations, let me just ask, what effects on the economy would the REINS Act bring if it were to become law?
I think it'd be subtle. I think some of the threats of using the
Yeah,
REINS
Tread, I
Act
ain't gonna
would be
make
more
you.
effective than actually using it. When agencies are aware that the REINS Act can be used, I think they'll act differently.
Thank
Better
you.
post them
Gentleman's
channels
time has
up.
expired. Gentleman from California, Mr. Correas.
I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman. I especially
Dude, we
want to
are
thank our witnesses
almost
for being
at
here today.
500
Appreciate your
followers,
testimony
man.
today.
So we gotta
I only
here
have
in the
5 minutes.
next
I'll
little
try to
bit.
be
We
quick.
definitely got to
Start
do a
out with Mr.
500
Smith. I
follower
want to ask you a
stream.
yes or no question, sir.
I'll see
The
if I can put
FTC
together a
started
cool
its
plasma cutter
investigation
something
into
to
your
give away.
acquisition of Evenu in 2018. Was that case started by the FTC under the Trump administration?
I mean,
The answer would be
embarrassingly, yes.
Yes.
Sorry, I was trying
Thank
to do
you.
the
It's a
math.
yes, no. Thank you. And Ms. Wade, I'm going to agree with you. Back home, my neighbors in Orange County, they don't really care about the details of regulation. All they want to know is our water safe to drink? Our cars safe to drive? Our medication
You still
safe
need to post
take?
it, Tread.
And
You
are our children safe at school? And of course, is the air they breathe, is it clean and safe? This is a picture of Los Angeles back in the 60s and 70s.
to Bob or not to Bob.
Regulations made this air in Los Angeles, Orange County, much cleaner. I was a kid then, and I can tell you, trying to play out in the
Regulations have
playground
about
in those
killed
times
industry
was painful.
in California.
Literally, you
There
had
are
to stop
plenty of ways they
playing
could have
because your
done
chest would hurt. All
stuff
of
with
us.
air quality and everything else
Regulations,
that would have killed
Some are
industry.
good, some are really good.
May I say something to that, please?
No, ma'am.
That
Right
357 SIG
I
all
wanted
The
to be
Supreme
noted, but I
Court,
wanted to say
ma'am,
something and say
ma'am,
no.
ma'am,
Thank you.
you got other people that may ask you a question.
Mm.
Thank you. The Supreme Court, when it comes to regulations, have made things worse. And members of Congress are willing to go along with the president, essentially giving up more of our express authority to the president. Are there cases of overregulation? Absolutely. But full-on deregulation is not the answer. It'll probably create more havoc, uncertainty for businesses, and imperil the health and safety of many Americans. Mr. Vladeck, U.S. government civil servants take an oath of loyalty to the Constitution and the United States. Does this oath of loyalty apply to all civil servants, including CIA, FBI, food inspectors, immigration frontliners, Social Security, and Medicare employees?
Everyone.
These civil servants could be making much more money in the private sector, yet they work for the federal government because they believe in the mission and helping citizens,
Most of
the
them
small
work for the
business in
federal
this great
government
country.
because they want to be little
Please tell us
tyrants,
what
but they
this oath
can't
of
make it in
office
private
means
industry.
in the context of how civil servants should be carrying out their duty.
Getting
Well, I think
feedback.
Congress, for generations, it is meant for better or for worse.
Feedback.
that
You
civil
talking about
servants
like trigger
don't work for
slap,
the
Tread?
president, they work for the government. And that the mission is to do what is in the best interest
I
of
don't
the
know what you mean
Constitution
by
of the United States,
feedback.
not the best interest of the current holder of the chief executive office. We won't always agree about how those civil servants carry out those missions. We won't always agree about what it means to be faithful to the Constitution. But the mere agreement that that is the goal, the mere agreement that that is what
oath and loyalty to the United States.
And, you know, we're all going to have different visions of what that is, Congressman, but at least we all agreed.
So, I mean, isn't your bolts just slamming back that
in your
hard?
testimony, you said, quote unquote, paraphrase.
I mean, 357
in 3
SIG,
weeks, I've
which
seen
you
a
know,
more
you're building the damn
sustained
gun,
assault
man.
by
It's
the
got a hell of a
president
lot of pressure.
on this institutional's constitutional prerogatives than we've seen in the first 250 years of this republic. Please elaborate. That's a very strong statement.
It is, Congressman. It's not one I make lightly, and it's not one I wish we were in a position to have to even be discussing today. But
Shut up,
when I look at how
Poindexter.
much power the president is claiming to not spend money that the Congress has appropriated, to defy statutory limits the Congress has imposed, to fire officials who Congress has insulated from removal.
But just the
take control of the
357 he's
bureaucracy in
got
ways
is
that
a
politicize everything
AR,
down to line appraising
semi-auto.
the Department of Justice. We've never seen. We might have
357.
seen flashpoints of that, Congressman. We've
Professor
never
one of the-
put this together.
Hell,
Everybody
Tread is
talks
the
about
first
Inspector
dude I
Generals.
know that
For my folks back home, can you
has a
explain to us
357
what an
SIG,
inspector general does?
like
So the
AR
inspector
pistol.
general is a government officer who's meant to look inwards at the agency of which he or she is the inspector general.
Yeah, oh
Who's
shit's
meant to
right. It's
ensure that the
badass.
agency is not engaged in fraud, waste, or abuse. They can do that on their own prerogative. They can do that at the request of employees. They can do that at the request
So
of
if there's,
outsiders.
if they're fired, what's the message here?
More
I
buffer
think the
weights
message
coming.
is that we don't want someone looking that carefully at what we're doing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I'm out of time, but if I can, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to have the
Yeah,
following
dude, when you get
documents
that thing
entered into the
dialed in,
record.
Tread, that joker is going to be freaking
The article from the New York
nice.
Times called "Trump's Actions Have Created a Constitutional Crisis," scholars say. Second, pro-Republica article, do regulators really kill jobs overall? Not so much.
Yes, they
Third
do.
article, released from Rutgers University, federal regulations don't really affect economic growth.
These
And the
fuckers
fourth,
don't think federal
from the Columbia
regulations.
Climate School, the dangers of deregulation. Thank you.
Granted without
Stymied.
objection.
Mr. Chairman, I
Gross.
have one UC request too.
But these are the same people that think
This
you can
is
change your
an
sex
article
by
from The
cutting off your
Economist last
pecker.
year, October 2024. The envy of the world, the American economy has left other rich countries in the dust. Cover story. Thank you.
Granted without objection. We'll now recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Isa, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, and
I've got
I really
news for you.
appreciate
If
the
you have an
testimony of my
addictomy
colleague from
operation,
California, since it looked like it was
you're
testimony,
still a
and
woman.
nothing more.
And if you had the
You know, the interesting thing
subtracted
is
dick from the
that,
operation,
that
you're
oath
still
he
a guy.
talked about, every state
Biology's a
employee
bitch, kids.
in California takes a similar oath. And the odd thing is, the district attorneys take an oath to the California Constitution and the United States Constitution, which means that they understand that sanctuary city law is
Yeah,
unconstitutional.
dude, just
it's
I don't
wrong,
think
and
Tread's
interfering
he
with
ain't far
federal
from getting that thing
employees,
dialed in.
trying
And that
to
thing's gonna be
execute, in
badass.
fact, would be a conflict of their oath. So I know the gentleman means well, but, you know, people sign oaths. How many take it seriously? And the answer is not nearly enough of our federal employees. Just yesterday, we dealt with the recognition that
No,
some
not near enough of the
people at
people
the
have taken oath
FBI,
in
either
Congress.
agents or staff, had willfully disclosed ICE's actions in a way that could cause them to be shot or killed by the MS-13 people they were attempting to round up as both criminals and illegal immigrants. Oaths are a wonderful thing, but with all due respect to my colleague who's left the room, let's talk about faithfully executing the Constitution. Mr. Smith, on the subject that we're here for, are you aware that the Federal Trade Commission has nearly a 100% success rate in their administrative court?
Yes, certainly.
Are you aware that even if an administrative judge were to not find you guilty, so to speak, that the commission can overrule that and basically make you guilty?
Yes, and I believe they do almost all the time.
Are you aware under the last 4 years of the Federal Trade Commission, they had far less than a 50% chance of surviving if they went to a federal court with a judge and a normal process of due process?
I believe that.
So the reality is you've got a kangaroo court at the Federal Trade Commission, and with all due respect, it doesn't really matter who's in the White House. The Federal Trade Commission has asserted its authority far beyond the intent of Congress.
I agree.
Now, in your case, you struck a chord with the Supreme Court. Basically, the recognition that when they start getting into Article 3, judges do have that right, and you don't have to exhaust all of the kangaroo court.
I don't think you bobbing much on that one, Trent.
The Article 3
court. Ain't a whole lot to bob on a
yes.
But let's ask the
hammer and
question
everything
for you and
an
the
AR
others
bill.
here. Wouldn't we be better off if, knowing that the Federal Trade Commission is not faithfully executing the intent of Congress, the statutes, and the Constitution, that you didn't have to
I still wonder if you could double up your
millions of dollars and perhaps lose an acquisition
springs
themselves if it's a federal law.
Hold on. Let's see whether we make it back from this. Mil-spec trigger. Yeah, there's not a whole lot I don't think you're going to like bob on, even on a mil-spec. I still wonder whether you could basically double up your springs in your buffer tube. I know there's some braided springs that are supposed to be better, maybe a bit heavier, last longer, all that shit. But I still wonder whether you could double up those springs along with your buffer weights and get that thing. Typically, they say not to control by springs. Okay. I didn't know. I was just thinking off the top of my head. I haven't had to work on one like that. So I have some flat wire coming. Oh, good deal. Abby, he's got a 357 SIG, basically a PCC that he's building and trying to dial in. And there ain't many people that have even tried that, much less getting it dialed in. And Tread ain't far from getting it dialed in. And 357 SIG out of a pistol build ought to be fucking smoking. The spur sitting at the top of the trigger bar. That little 10-inch ought to be badass, Tread. Dude, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know about trying to work on that trigger spur. 357 SIG is a great round. It just never caught a hell of a lot of traction. Grind off quarter of it. Yeah, I mean, you can try it. Shit, man, run it. I mean, that's how innovation happens. Blue Curtain Burner, what's up, brother? All right, let me get back to playing this, and then I'm gonna hit my wireless, and I'm gonna start cooking in the background.
100%. Yes.
Here's the last question, and I'd like each of you to opine on it briefly. The REINS Act attempts to say for major regulations, is there any reason that any of you can find that Congress should not be able to, at any time, by a simple vote, second guess? In other words,
REINS Act was
second guess
ridiculous.
a regulation that has been made by an agency that says it's the will of Congress, but in fact cannot.
Yeah, he's planning on it because his problem is the bolts.
Same numbers that it takes to pass
SIG,
the law.
that 357 is such a high pressure round.
To a regulation.
The bolts just slinging back so fast. So Tread's
Wait.
working with springs and working with buffer weights and all that. So
Yes.
Give you a shot.
Absolutely. The range act.
he's
Yes.
getting on top of it for sure.
Yes, sir.
I mean, I think there's a longer conversation to have Congress versus Chadha. You know, I think, I mean, one of the things that I'm struck by is I don't know.
Well, wait a second. I was asking a more narrow question than a legislative veto. Congress de novo, and they simply said, will we support that regulation? It's not a veto. And you go through the process of the House, the Senate, and the White House. Is there anything inherently wrong?
I'm sorry, Congressman, I misunderstood. I thought you were skipping presentment. No, of course, Congress can do anything to overturn a regulation through bicameralism presentment. I wish Congress would do it more.
Right. And now Dr. Rist of the holding a vote and not.
Fitzgerald. And what we're experiencing right now is a 5-alarm fire of the
And I think we're back. My connection's bouncing again for no freaking reason whatsoever. What's up, G23? How you doing, my brother? Welcome to the Clown Show.
The administrative state, and not for the reasons that my colleagues across the aisle are saying. Instead, in the first few weeks he's been president, Trump and his pal Elon, an unelected bureaucrat, are bulldozing key watchdog agencies. Instead of protecting people from government overreach, they're destroying the mechanisms to protect them. As it turns out, their approach is so unpopular with the American people that they've had to save face a couple times by pretending to abandon course. That happened with the government funding freeze. What people want is for corporations to be held accountable, not for their Medicaid benefits to disappear, then used to fund tax cuts for the ultra-wealthy. What my constituents want is for their civil rights and liberties to be respected, not Elon Musk's teenage fanboys prying into their personal information. What their actions prove is that DOGE isn't about efficiency of the administrative state or for the American people. Instead, it's about allowing corporations to abuse workers with fewer rules and ripping off consumers with more impunity than they already do. Take the National Labor Relations Board. Since the Great Depression, the NLRB has a proud history of protecting the rights of employees to bargain collectively. In fact, the NLRB has repeatedly ruled against Tesla for violating labor laws, including retaliating against workers for union organizing and focusing employees to delete pro-union tweets. But on January 27th, the Trump administration made the unprecedented decision to illegally fire NLRB board member Gwen Wilcox. Federal law states that the NLRB members may be removed for neglect of duty or malfeasance in office, but no other case. Yet, neither was cited as the basis for Ms. Wilcox firing. So, my first question for Professor Vladeck, based on your legal expertise, how does this action violate statutory protections for independent agency members, and what does it mean for American workers?
I mean, I think it's pretty clear that it violates the statute, Congressman. I think the question that's going to arise in litigation is arguments that statute's unconstitutional, but we're not there yet. I mean, the courts haven't said as much. What does that mean? I mean, I think it means that you lose the capacity, even in this administration, to have meaningful enforcement through the NLRB and through its processes of our federal labor laws, which of course I think tilts the scales in one direction toward the folks who are alleged to have violated those laws.
Thank you. Moving on to the CFPB. It's an independent agency created to protect consumers from predatory financial practices, including hidden fees and data privacy violations. It's won back $17.5 billion for Americans since its creation in 2008. In just 2 weeks before Trump took over, the CFPB sued Capital One for cheating people out of interest payments, ordered a major auto lender
Welcome
to
back,
return
Brother Gabe.
$10 million to customers, and ordered Cash App to refund $120 million to customers. Predictably, billionaires who want to get rich off of predatory practices don't love this agency. And as of this weekend, Trump and his cronies shut it down. Professor Vladek, from a legal perspective, can you explain?
Hey, G,
the
post your,
importance
which
of
I told
independent
everybody else,
agencies
but dude,
like the
post your channel
CFPB,
in the chat,
which has
man.
a statutory mandate to protect consumers,
That's
and
why
when
you
they're
guys got
eliminated,
wrenches.
who gets hurt?
So, I mean, I think for over a century, Congressman, Congress's position has been, and I think it's been borne out, that independent agencies and independent commissions are better situated to look out for things like, you know, the securities market, to look out for things like consumer protection, than presidents of political parties who have, you know, donors, political allies to try to support. Who gets hurt? I think the folks who get left in the balance are the folks who don't have access to the White House, the folks who don't have the ability to persuade this president that it's in his interest to support them. And I think that's increasingly the members of the American working class, Congressmen, Democrats, and Republicans alike.
Thank you, sir. And finally, Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record an article from Foreign Policy dated January 24, 2024, that reports that the economic zones, which have been referenced by one of our witnesses today, and she was just celebrating, were found to have no transparency or accountability mechanisms, bear an astonishing level of autonomy, which the UN has expressed concern for human rights. They have created private courts, private police forces, and privatized law systems, which have no place anywhere in the world, and certainly not in the U.S.
Granted without objection.
Thank you, sir. The title is U.S. Investors Could Bankrupt Honduras with Biden Administration Support. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Kansas, Mr. Schmidt, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank all the witnesses for being here and for their patience. We have heard a lot of words today. I marked these, Ms. Wad, when you said them the first time through. I think perhaps the most important words we've heard today were in your prepared testimony. You said, "I'm here to provide a sense of urgency regarding the need for streamlined regulatory and administrative rules." And then you said, "Large, powerful firms can afford armies of lawyers and attorneys to stay compliant."
Screw connection again. These guys are all bums, man. Yeah, they are. For the most part, yeah. Dude, G, do it. Run it, man. I'd love to see you do your own video on that. Put it on your channel. Walk everybody through the process.
Day. Look, this stuff can get mind-numbingly dull, especially when you get into the academic literature surrounding administrative law. But there's a fairly new book out. It's in plain English. It's not aimed at an academic audience. I don't know if our witnesses have had a chance yet to read Justice Gorsuch's new book, Overruled: The Human Toll of Too Much Law. I see Mr. Vladek has a chuckle. Apparently he thinks the justice is insufficiently brilliant on this subject matter. I have a different point of view. One of the things that appears in that book is a chart drawn from the Regulatory Studies Center at George Washington University. I've asked the staff to place it on the screens for us. This is the chart of the number of pages in the Federal Register starting in 1950. Take a look at that chart. It's a zero-based chart. It's not cutting off the top. It's about 10,000 pages of regulatory law in the United States in 1950, the year I was born. 1968, it had exploded after the Great Society to about 50,000 pages. It is today pushing 200,000 pages of binding regulatory law. Mr. Chairman, that is why the folks I represent in Kansas sound a whole lot more like Ms. Watt and Mr. Smith than they do like Professor Vladeck or some of my colleagues
Muffin
on this
top,
committee.
my brother. What's
They're
going
not
on?
worried about the
Hey,
academic
remember, all
impact and the
these
theory. They're worried about what it
regulations
means for their
carry
day-to-day
the
lives, and
force
can they
of
stay
law.
compliant, and can they continue to operate, and can they
So
pursue
you
the
get
American
thrown
dream?
in fucking
I
prison
have a
for
couple
these
of questions for our witnesses.
regulations.
Let me start with Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith, as Kansas Attorney General, I took a number of cases all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court challenging various federal regulatory actions. I know how burdensome it can be. I'm thinking of one when we challenged an Obama-era iteration of the Waters of the U.S.
What in
rule.
the
We
hell
started in
just
district
happened?
court in Georgia. We ended up MDL, and I think it was Ohio, fighting about whether we'd started in the right court. We had to await a U.S. Supreme Court decision on the jurisdiction issue. We went back to Georgia after that all happened. We finally got an injunction in the administration appeal.
Hold
Then
on,
we were 3
guys.
presidents later
We are
before the political system finally overtook the litigation.
suffering from retardation here because I hit something and most of my controls on StreamYard just went away. And I mean, like, seriously went away. All right. We're back. And I have no idea what in the hell I just hit. But pretty much all my controls on StreamYard, the chat and everything just fucking appeared. Agarize, what is up, brother man? How are you doing tonight? Like to be a regular? Oh, man.
You talked about how much money you spent fighting your one battle. Could you have used that money more effectively in some other manner?
Oh, goodness, yes.
Yeah,
I
like
mean, we put it
buying
into research and
lube.
development, building new products, innovating, entering new markets with sales investments. Lots of places that would have had a return for our investors.
Did the regulators pay your attorney's fees when that was all over?
No, sir, they did not.
I see. And Dr. McLaughlin, let me ask you this. I was intrigued by my colleague, Congressman Iss's line of questioning. I was especially intrigued when he went down the panel, and I believe all 4 of our witnesses agreed, Professor Vladeck enthusiastically, if I'm not mistaken. I don't want to mischaracterize it, but as long as there's bicameralism and presentment, I think your words were you would like to see Congress do more of overseeing and deciding whether to keep particular regulations. So my question for you, Dr. McLaughlin, is this. The Congressional Review Act currently has what is functionally a fixed look-back window. Right now, I think if it's a regulation came in around August of last year or later, we can use the CRA's mechanisms to decide whether we want to keep it or reject it as an elected body exercising the Article 1 power that is ultimately the basis for the regulatory action in the first place. Is there any reason we ought to limit ourselves to this functionally 6-ish month look back? We got a bill on the floor this week that would make it a year look back. Would that be better?
There's no reason not to extend the look back, in my opinion. Extending the CRA would allow more. We're talking about midnight regulations effectively that the CRA.
But we don't have to be, right? I mean, why are we worried only about midnight? I think it's great to be worried about midnight, but why not 6 p.m.? Why aren't we worried about a regulation that was promulgated in 1994 if it no longer makes sense? And you have bicameralism and presentment, and this body wants to reject that regulation, or in 1958 or in 1973. What's the rationale?
I don't think there is a rationale for not extending it further back. I think that we're just stuck in a situation of inertia.
We've always done it this way. Would you encourage us to take a look at amending the Congressional Review Act to give this body the authority under its procedures to reject agency regulations regardless of when they were promulgated?
Well, as a scholar, I'm hesitant to endorse any specific bill, but it does seem like it would have positive economic consequences.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Now recognize the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Wade was making this point earlier. I thought it was well stated, talking in a broad sense. To lead the world diplomatically, to lead the world militarily, you first have to lead the world economically. And to lead the world economically, you need some basic things. You need readily available energy at affordable cost, and you need freedom. That's Mrs. Wade's point. And you know what? We had a lot more freedom when that chart that Mr. Smith just put up there was a lot lower in
Yeah,
regulation.
why do you think Democrats are against
like
energy
Ms. Wade and
policy
Mr.
and
Smith,
actually
the
producing
entrepreneurs who make our
energy?
economy go and go and go, able to do their thing. Ms. Wade, you wanted to make you wanted to respond to one of the Democrats. I forget who was asking or saying something. You want to respond? I'm gonna give you a chance to respond, then I'm gonna go to our economists and to Mr. Smith. Hit your microphone, because.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Thank you so much.
This chick is
I want to
amazing.
respond two things. Mr. Garcia is gone, but I wish he was here. And same with Mr. Correa, I think it was. So I'll start with Mr. Garcia when he brought up, oh, these Prospera, these zones she wanted here, no space for them here in America. Well, guess what? It is going to happen in America. And that article that you brought up, you know, foreign policy, I just would like the same way that article is going to be included, I would like for the FAQ that I'm going to send you to be included in there as well, so we can refute all those claims that are made in articles like that. If anything, these zones were put in place by the government of Honduras itself in this situation. Government of Honduras.
All over the
And
United
if anything,
States.
we know by now that organizations like the USAID funding NGOs have been actually undermining this type of initiatives because these are anti-business NGOs. So USAID hurting us, there you go. And then Mr. Correa, who is not here, I wish he was here when he had the nerves to tell us that these regulations are here to help us. I just would like for him to answer me to this situation. Around the 1800s, since the 1800s, it was known that lead pipes that were being used for, that we were using were toxic, bad, causing probably brain damages in children. As early as 1800, it was known. Then you tell me, why is it that it took until 1986 for it mandatory for builders to use lead pipes for the water pipes? Where did government really help us here? Where? I wish Mr. Correa was here. Government is helping us. These regulations are helping us. Give me a break. And I see you looking at Chevrolet like this. I will send you my report on Mr. Russ. Thank you so much for government working for the people. I see government working for government, whatever the heck that sounds like. Okay? And I would like for one that it is about my safety and about my well-being. And in situations like this and in as many others like that, it is clear that these regulations are not put in place with us in mind, and that needs to stop. And the fact that Mr. Raskin, you're here this whole time we've been here, you've just been complaining about the process. I'll call it a process. And again, I'm not disagreeing with your issues right now around Musk and the process that's following Mr. Vladek, the process that you're following. At some point, what is the end game? Isn't the end game to make us, the American people, better off? Isn't it? Isn't it? No, I hear you saying that the stuff that would make us better off doesn't matter. All you care about right now is a process of Musk and his associates are not doing this the right way. Is the goal moral and right or not? If you say it is, as I think you should be saying, then the fight shouldn't be about, we need to take Musk down or Trump down. Let us rethink that if you want, but keep your eye on the ball, and your ball should be me. It should be me. I'm sorry, it should be me. Yeah. It should be me. How do we make me better off? Thank you, Mr. Jordan.
You bet. And by me, you mean the American people.
That's what I mean by that.
Dr. McLaughlin, and we appreciate that. Dr. McLaughlin, in college, I majored in wrestling, but you're supposed to get a degree in college. So I got one in economics. And one of the terms I remember was this term called opportunity cost. Can you tell us real quick what opportunity cost is?
It's the things you don't do because something else requires your.
No, you're in. Yeah, hopefully it ain't mine. My
millions of dollars
fighting
some stupid bureaucrat regulation where if he fought it there, he'd have to go. The very bureaucrats who made the rule and tell him to do things, he'd have to go to their court, and he had to go to other court, and he could have been expanding our economy, building his business, but no. Perfect. He had to deal with the bureaucrats who the other side thinks are the experts and should run our government.
Yeah, there's not much you can do
when you boil it all down. That's what Mr. Smith had to deal with. Is that right?
And it was used
yes, sir. And that's what my research finds. Is when businesses get deflected from investing in R&D and expansion, that the
and
economy
it's
does not grow, and it's because
done
regulations are making them
serious
spend their
damage.
Which
resources
makes
on
it
other
tougher
activities.
for our country to lead, to Miss Wade's point. If you're making it tougher for the people who grow our economy, make us stay the economic superpower, it's tougher then to lead militarily, diplomatically, and that's what it all does. And that's what the chairman, why he's having this hearing, that's what he's trying to change. And we got a bill on the floor tomorrow. Midnight rules bill gets rid of a bunch of these stupid rules that these agencies do. We can get rid of packages of them instead of one at a time.
Yeah, they had a hearing
That's
on
a
the
good thing. I
midnight
appreciate the
rules
chairman's
bill
work on this committee.
yesterday
I yield back.
night. I had
Chairman
shit
yields
going on. I
back.
couldn't stream it.
That concludes today's hearing. We thank our witnesses for appearing before the committee today without objection. All members will have 5 legislative days to submit additional written questions for the witnesses and additional materials for the record. Without objection, the hearing is adjourned.
Matter of fact, I didn't realize that hearing was that short. I thought this one was a little bit longer, but let's look at this because I had it up earlier. I hadn't got to watch it yet. And since they mentioned it here, we'll watch it because I ain't watched it yet. So hearing 70 or on 77. So this was it. All right, so we'll share this since I'm chilling and trying to get dinner squared away.
Good afternoon. The committee will come to order. Without objection, the committee is off. The chair is off.
So, and they'll explain more about the midnight rules and stuff like that in a second. But it has a lot to do with the propagation of rules through these agencies that just get slammed through a lot of the times by a president in his last, little bit in office. And of course, it came up in the pistol brace stuff and then the frames and receiver rules. And that's why some of this is so important. These regulations do hold the force of law. So you give these regulatory agencies, the ATF and others, the power to create regulations that can put you in prison. Knowing these regulating agencies, ATF, EPA, all of them are really against any kind of industry or freedom in a lot of cases, and letting them manage their own rules and the shit they can put you in prison over is a bit like letting a fox decide that he has the full run of the hen house anytime he wants. So we'll share this out and watch this. I haven't watched this either, so I haven't watched a minute of this. But this is apparently going to the House floor tomorrow.
Is authorized to declare a recess at any time. Today, the Rules Committee is convening to consider H.R. 77, the
Virginia
Midnight
Fox.
Rules
She is the
Relief Act.
gray-haired
The
assassin
Midnight
in
Rules
Congress.
Relief Act was considered by the Rules Committee and passed the House before the 118th Congress ended. We're back to finish the job and to set this bill on a glide path directly to President Trump's desk. Previous administrations, both Republican and Democrat, have churned out hundreds of new rules, what we refer to as midnight rules, as the clock winds down on their respective tenures. As a direct result, Congress becomes mired in regulatory malaise. It's an all too familiar occurrence that should be remedied. Now Congress already possesses the power to hold regulatory overreach in check via current law, which is a Congressional Review Act. That said, a Congressional Review Act is limited in scope in that it applies to a single rule. For subsequent rules that are issued, each one requires its own separate resolution. As one can imagine, previous administrations, both Republican and Democrat, have seized upon this and inundated Congress with regulatory blitzes, often to the detriment of the very people we are here to serve, our constituents. The Midnight Rules Relief Act provides a reasonable common sense remedy to this problem that has existed for decades. H.R. 77 provides the legislative branch with a leg up with respect to executive rulemaking, regardless of the administration, by allowing Congress to consider multiple rules in one fell swoop. The result of this is twofold. Congress can keep pace with the issuance of midnight rules, and it can also provide a necessary diligent check against the federal bureaucracy. Spurring congressional efficiency and reining in the federal bureaucracy at the same time are causes worthy of bipartisan support. I certainly believe that to be true. Speaking of bipartisan support, I'll note this legislation did receive bipartisan support in December. I do hope that more of our Democrat colleagues will take the opportunity the second time around to join us in passing it. I look forward to the discussion of this legislation, and I yield to Ranking Member Mr. McGovern for any comments he wishes to make.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And as you mentioned, today we will consider H.R. 77, the Midnight Rules Relief Act. We met on this bill back in December. Now the stakes are even higher. So let's be very clear. This bill is nothing more than a blatant power grab by House Republicans designed to make
Patriot, what's up, brother?
To gut protections for everyday people.
You're at lunch at work. Well, hopefully you're having a good night at work, brother.
Billionaires and special interests. Because the thing is, billionaires want no workplace protections. They want no rules against dumping toxic chemicals into our food, water, or air. They want no restrictions on corporate greed. And Republicans are all too happy to help them get their way by dismantling the very agencies that hold them accountable. The goal is to destroy our government and rebuild it to serve.
It's like we're all stalking each other, isn't it?
Rich. The Midnight Rules Relief Act is just another tool to speed up that process. And it's right out of the Project 2025 playbook. Remember that? Project 2025 writer, now OMB director Russell Vought wrote, and I quote, "To leverage the CRA's power to the maximum extent, Congress and the President should enact the Midnight Rules Relief Act, which would help to ensure that multiple regulatory actions could be packaged and voted on at the same time." End quote. Translation: if Republicans win in November, which they did, they want this bill in place so they can gut regulations immediately, handing even more power over to polluters, scammers, monopolies, and corporate profiteers. And who will pay the price? The American people.
And remember, Democrats were basically on board with this when they thought they were going to have another Democrat administration.
You control the House and you control the Senate. If you want to strip protections from hardworking families, put your mandate pants on and have the.
Yeah, I know everybody was in Crump Stream.
One by one, so that every American knows exactly where.
I was planning on being in Crump Stream, but
thank you, Mr.
ended
McGovern.
up with that hearing today, and I got off in enough time to
prepared
stream it, so I
statements that our
decided to do
witnesses
that,
may
and I'll catch
have
his replay.
will be included in the record. I welcome our first panel, Representative Klein and Ranking Member Raskin from the Committee on the Judiciary. I remind witnesses that your full statement may be submitted for the record.
Patriot, any
summarize your
judge
statement in
who looks at a
5
Ford
minutes or
case
less.
or some of the other ones that are
Klein,
just
I
like the
welcome
Ford
your
card,
testimony.
any
Thank you,
judge who
Madam
looks
Chair.
at those should
Members,
absolutely rule them
H.R.
unconstitutional.
77, the Midnight Rules Relief Act, is an important piece of legislation
Because
that will
they're
allow
not
Congress to more
constitutional
effectively and
whatsoever.
efficiently oversee federal agency rulemaking. Under the Congressional Review Act, known as the CRA, executive agencies must
Going to
report
the
all
court for
following
5 to 6
rules
years.
to
Yeah,
the
that's,
chambers of
I mean,
Congress.
it's,
This reporting requirement allows Congress to
it can
properly
take at
consider
least a
federal
decade to
regulations
fight a lot of
before they
these
take effect.
cases.
CRA gives
Just to
Congress
get them
the
through
ability to pass joint
the
resolutions
state
to
courts
prevent
into the
these agency
district
rules from
courts can
taking
take
effect.
that long. With all the
CRA's
motions
approval
and the,
mechanism is a critical check on federal administrative overreach. However, the CRA requires Congress to consider a single, separate joint
3-judge
resolution for
panels
each
versus
agency
en
rule
banc panels
it
with the
seeks to
whole
render
court
unenforceable.
and
This
all the
one-by-one
motions and
approach
crap
to
that they
joint
do to
resolutions
drag
under
these
the
cases
CRA
out.
slows Congress's oversight of
That's
agency
why these
rulemaking.
leftists don't care about
The
putting in
inefficiency was most
unconstitutional
clear
laws, because they
during the
know it's going
midnight
to take
rulemaking period
decades to
of
shoot
the
them down.
last year of a president's term,
when executive agencies historically issue substantially more regulations. So the problem of midnight rulemaking is most clearly seen by examining the Biden
Well, it's more than
administration's
just
use of
about
the
money. It's about
CRA
control.
look-back window. This window
It's
includes any
about
rules submitted to
stopping
Congress
people from
August 16th,
actually
2024
carrying
to the
firearms
end of the Biden
and owning
administration.
firearms
During that period, the Biden administration
to defend
finalized a
themselves.
staggering 1,406 rules. By forcing Congress to consider rules, but one by one, the CRA limits Congress's ability to review such an onslaught of rulemaking in the twilight hours of a
MC,
president's
brother
term.
man, what
HR
is going
77
on? I
would
see
make
you over there. The
Congress's
Rumble
oversight
chat's
of
actually
agency and
posting tonight.
regulatory activity during this midnight rulemaking period more efficient. The Midnight Rules Relief Act would allow Congress to introduce joint resolutions.
No, the money
with
and control
multiple
go hand to
agencies
hand,
in the final
Warsaw.
year in a
I
president's
mean, this
term. And this change would allow
they
Congress to
absolutely
efficiently
go hand
respond
to
to the
hand,
influx in
hand
agency
and
regulations
hand,
during the
hand in
midnight hours
hand.
of the president's
Yeah,
term.
something like
I look
that.
forward to answering any questions you may have. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. 2 minutes. Very good. Mr. Raskin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairwoman Fox. The pressure is on. The purpose of the bill before us is not to give Congress
remember the
the
term.
power to undo midnight rules, because Congress, as you say, Madam Chair, already has that power. For example, right now, House Republicans can try to undo every single rule issued by the Biden administration from August of last year to Inauguration
100%
Day.
Warsaw.
This is a potent power which properly reflects the broader congressional power to legislate and to correct or revise an agency's interpretation of a statute. So what does the bill do? Well, it would allow a majority to roll up lots of midnight regulations, indeed all of them adopted in the final months of the prior administration, together, tie them into a large bunch, and then vote them down in a single jumbo resolution. This tactic would be used to try to get Congress to eliminate all available midnight regs in one fell swoop, forcing every member to vote either to sustain all of the regulations or to vote all of them down.
Congress would have to.
This would
do their
allow the
fucking
119th
jobs.
Congress, for example, to tie all the 66 relevant Biden regulations from last term into one bundle and move to vaporize them in a single vote. It would undoubtedly take place with precious little debate, but even if there were meaningful debate, the whole process would be deeply flawed, because what's a member to do if he or she strongly approves, say, of overturning 50 of the rules, but strongly opposes overturning 16 of them? Do they let the majority of the bills overtake the minority and vote aye on the whole package, or do
Well,
they give
I won't
the
say
smaller
nothing
group
good
of
happens
bills the
after
veto
midnight
power
agorizer,
and vote
'cause
no? This weird dilemma
some good
forces us
things
to ask
happen after
why we
midnight.
would even force
I will
such a
say
choice.
this: nothing
The
good
manifest
after
purpose of
midnight
the bill is
happens
to
for
allow House
government.
members to hide from the political consequences of voting to repeal rules one by one. It allows our GOP friends to say they were
Being a wife
forced
got kids,
to
man.
overturn
Sometimes
some
it's
really
like-
good water quality or infant safety regulations because they were so eager to strike down some other big bad regulation in the package. Instead of considering these regs one at a time on their merits, as current law requires, the bill creates the power in Congress to wipe out potentially hundreds of regulations in a single coercive party line vote, or 66 of them in this Congress. When I first heard about this classic inside the Beltway legislative subterfuge, I immediately wanted to get in touch with the gentleman from Arizona, Representative Andy Biggs, because I remembered that he was the proud and very compelling sponsor of HR 91, the one bill,
Congress,
one
it
subject
applies to
Transparency
state
Act.
governments,
This
and
legislation
it
requires
applies
each
to
bill or
anything
joint
that happens
resolution
on the
to,
streets
quote,
after midnight.
include no more than one
Yeah.
subject, and the subject to be
At
clearly and
home in my
descriptively
house, I've seen
expressed
some really
in
good
the
shit
measure's
happen after
title.
midnight. I'm
Thus,
just
the
saying.
Midnight Regulation Kitchen Sink Bill would violate everything Congressman Biggs believes about the legislative process. Members should be voting on one subject only, or one regulation at a time, not a dozen different subjects and a dozen different rules. And the title of the bill
Abby, you
should
shouldn't
clearly
drink it all.
communicate its proper subject. But amazingly, before I could get to Representative Biggs to tell him that we had to get together to stop this monstrosity, I was told by my staff that he was actually the author of the Midnight Rules Relief Act. The lead sponsor of the One Bill, One Subject Transparency Act is now
I'm telling you,
advocating this
Jamie
massive
Raskin
conglomeration
didn't, like,
of subjects and
cure the
decisions, a
cancer.
huge legislative
cancer
stew where
couldn't stand
poison
the son of a
pills
bitch and had
and
to
healthy
go away from it.
vegetables are mixed up freely and thrown in together for one deliberately confusing and incomprehensible meal. This approach is exactly what my friends in the Freedom Caucus have complained about for years. the passage of needlessly complex legislation covering way too many topics at once. As Mr. Biggs's press release on One Bill, One Subject stated, too often congressional leaders use must-pass bills as methods for passing other laws that may have failed if considered on their own. Mr. Biggs' traditional solution to this problem has been simple. The One Bill, One Subject Transparency Act, which he fought for last Congress, would require that every bill considered by the House encompass no more than one subject at a
That's
time.
about
And
bills.
if it doesn't,
It's
if it goes
not
beyond
about
that, the entire bill becomes
regulations that
void.
some
So I will stand
popcorn
up for the principle I
potatoes
once fought,
slammed
unified
in
me
in
with
the
Mr.
last
Biggs, even if
hours
for
of the
some reason
administration.
he's gone over to the dark side on
Shit
this
that
one,
doesn't get voted
borrowing
on. He
from his
just
former
signs the
principles, I
shit and all of a
proposed
sudden
an
it's
amendment to
regulation.
the Midnight Rules Relief Act. Using language taken directly from his legislation, I propose that any resolution we consider overturning agency rules should be limited to a single subject. And if the resolution tries to nullify regulations in two or more diverse subject areas, the resolution, as he would have it, becomes null and void. The whole point of the One Bill, One Subject House Republican movement, as I understood it, is that we should not avoid legislative transparency or accountability by shoving unrelated, mysterious packages into a single moving legislative vehicle. I'm going to insist on the same standard today. Congress can already block midnight rules one at a time with a scalpel. It seems deceptive backsliding now to smash all of them at once with the jackhammer. I urge my colleagues to oppose the Midnight Rules Relief Act, and feeling that, I urge you to make my amendment in order, and I look forward to your questions, and yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you yielding back. Now recognize Ms. Fishbach for her questions.
Thank you very much. And I just want to refocus just a smidge. And this bill simply allows Congress to oversee the administrative rulemaking without bogging us down for each and every rule. But it is only on those rules that are issued in the last 60 days of a presidency. Is that correct, Mr. Klein?
It would allow for those rules that were issued in the last year.
Okay.
Of a president's term, but the CRA only allows for consideration within the 60-day window.
Okay. But it is limited.
Yes.
It is not this great, horrible thing that the opposition is trying to make it out to be, that we are just going to pile things together and create this bill, and it's a great mystery to the entire country of what's in the bill.
No, I appreciate the question. It definitely would not. It is simply a measure.
Tactical Skillionaire, what is up, my brother? How are you doing?
Priority
How are you
always
in the
has
fan?
the option of bringing legislation to address the specific regulation that they're concerned about, and it would disincentivize what we saw out of the last.
Hey, Skilly, make sure you post your channel in the chat.
At the end of the administration to issue over 1,000 regulations that really place an enormous cost on businesses.
And anybody that's not following Skilly, man, you need to be following Brother Skilly.
And so,
Chuck, what is up?
Designed to address that, but also to
Brother man,
assist
you okay
in
tonight?
the efficient use of time by Congress and by the good gentlemen and gentlewomen.
And all the rest of you jokers that got channels, post that
And
shit up.
Fine, I'll just mention that, last week we had.
Eventually, we get new people rolling through. You
regarding
guys need to be sharing them
and
channels out.
There was a lot of discussion from the other side regarding executive overreach, and they were very concerned about it then. But now with this bill, where it would put some check on executive overreach, that doesn't seem to be the issue. And so I think that overregulation is something that we heard about all the time during the election. And we hear it still. We hear about it before the election, during the election, and after the election, about the overregulation, what it's doing to small businesses, what it's doing to our farmers. And so I appreciate that you are trying to get at that and be able to address it, and rein in that executive overreach. And isn't it interesting that we had the bill last year, but we're continuing it because executive overreach is always there. So, we are consistent in the fact that we are looking at this and making sure that we can address the overregulation. So I appreciate you bringing the bill forward, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Now recognize Ranking Member McGovern.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a little confused. The gentlelady talked about us complaining about executive overreach and fentanyl. I don't recall that. All I recall during that debate was that some of us wanted to know why my Republican friends were okay with the President of the United States pardoning a guy who helped funnel fentanyl into this country, who was given a life sentence by a federal court. Why that was okay for him to be pardoned? I don't know what, the president has the right to pardon whoever he wants to pardon, but the issue was like, I was just surprised that so many of my friends thought that was okay, or, felt that was something they had to be silent on. And again, talking about executive overreach at this moment in time, is laughable, to be honest with you. These regulations, whether you like them or not, went through an exhaustive and legal process.
No, they
And
didn't.
look what's happening now. This president and weirdo Elon Musk and his
Went through an
minions
exhaustive
are going through
legal.
people's personal
The
information.
potato in
They
charge
are
signed the
trying
shit.
to shut down USAID, and now we're told the Department of Education, they don't have the legal
Yeah,
authority.
suddenly,
to do that.
Tuck, suddenly.
That's executive overreach. And the courts are ruling that it is executive overreach, and the president has no right to be able to do that. And now we're being told.
Good deal.
by
You
the
guys
White House
don't
that
sub
they
to
may
Skilly,
ignore,
man. Sub.
what the
Skilly
court
normally
said.
does a show.
Now
Normally
we have
Sundays.
a
I think he might have
constitutional
moved it
crisis on our hands.
to
And so
Skilly. Correct me if
friends
I'm
are
wrong. Like
totally
one or
fine with all this
two
just going on
Sundays
because it's Donald Trump and Elon Musk
with his
and
bulletproof
they're
Sundays.
afraid to make any
It
waves.
puts on. It has some
But
great freaking
going
shows,
to Mr.
guys.
Raskin's point, under this bill, you can just
Sometimes they're fun shows.
put a whole
Sometimes
bunch of
Skilly
these,
gets in some
regulations into one package.
some stuff pretty
and have
deep.
An hour of debate, half an
but
hour on each
great
side.
shows.
You may hide some good things in there. There's some
And I
people on
think
your
Skilly
side might
helps a
even think
lot of guys,
is,
man.
is
Guys
a
particularly.
good, proper
But I think
oversight
he
of the
helps a
federal
lot of
government. And there'll be no debate on any of this. And when the general lady talks about us being, we don't want to be bogged down. I don't know. I'm looking at the schedule. Does anybody here think that we have a busy legislative schedule? We have 2 bills this week, plus some suspension bills. You could bring up 5 of these CRAs if you wanted to, and we have plenty of time to, do it. So it's a 5-minute vote, an hour debate on each one of them. The idea that we're bogged down, we're trying to save time. Come on.
We all know
This is
Joe Q. He'll be over there a lot
I
of
don't know, Mr. Raskin,
times.
do you
Hot
wanna
Tub Tony
add
will be
before
there.
I would go further
Bunch of cool
than that. I
guys.
would
Silverback
say
will be over
if we
there.
had to stay past 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. in order to do the people's business, we should do it. And I mean it very seriously about Representative Biggs. I
He's
always
a
appreciated the
fucking cool
fact
group of
that
guys
he
every Sunday.
concentrated on voting on one discrete subject at a time so the public could understand what we're really voting on, up or down.
Yeah, I
and
couldn't
now
be that
suddenly,
polite, though, would it?
his name at least, I was hoping to see him here so I could ask him about
my
it.
friends on the other
His
side of the
name is on
aisle,
top
I'd
of
be
a
like,
bill
those
that would allow us to
over
pack
there
in completely unrelated
probably why I'm not in
subjects
government.
on totally different regulations and vote for them en masse. When I count 66, that's a conservative estimate.
I would
That's just
not
from the
survive
final
my
60
first
days.
speech
If
on
we
the House
indeed
floor.
took, as the good gentleman suggests, all of the regulations from the year, you could put hundreds
can't
in
throw
there
personalities at
and just
people.
vote them down. And I concede your implicit point, Mr. McGovern, that,
like to
well,
strike
at
his
least they'd
words.
be
I
coming to
would like to
Congress
punch you
to
in
do
the
it with
face.
Elon Musk. He's just remaking the law on his own. He's a 4th branch of government. He does whatever he wants. So here, maybe they think that at least they would be gesturing at some form of legality. But I think that that's a really dangerous way to go, to have people voting on everything from, animal welfare to water quality to air quality to food and drug to the Defense Department to NSA to space, all in one bill. And how are you going to explain to people who are your constituents what you're voting on and what you did? Will anybody even be able to remember it? So that totally cuts against what I thought the Freedom Caucus has been fighting for, which is one subject, one bill, the name of their centerpiece legislation.
Days of his presidency.
I think the deal here is
come on, man.
not be held accountable. To vote on monstrosity pieces of legislation.
I'd like to do a rule. Every member of Congress has to
individual
get
votes. And by the
voted
way,
every year.
CRA
Whoever pays them money, they have to wear on
brought
their
to the floor under closed
foreheads.
rules.
A
I
NASCAR.
assume that, you would bring this to the floor under a closed rule. You take away our ability to be able to amend things, to be able to offer amendments. Now
No,
you want to take away
the
our
president
ability
can
to
make
debate these
rules.
subject matters.
I mean, for basically
I
for the
think
departments to
that's,
sign them
you know,
in.
that's dangerous for this
Um,
institution.
just
I thank
with,
you both for being here. I yield back.
click of the pen and a couple little scribbles.
I would note
So,
that
and
the
I
Freedom
don't
Caucus is
think
open to
their
all kinds of
rules
folks. And
have
if
to
the
go
gentleman
get posted on the
wishes to
federal
join,
registry
feel free to
for,
fill out an application.
30 or 60
That
days
being
for
said, Mr.
comment
Lang, ready for
periods
your
and all
turn.
that.
Thank you very much,
run
Mr.
like-
Chairman. Representative Klein, to just clarify this, the process outlined under the
But
CRA
even when
has
you,
been
even
abused by
when you
both
have to post
Democrat
a
and
so-called
Republican
rule to the
administration
federal
for
registry
midnight
like the
rulemaking.
ATF has to,
Would that be correct?
how many people are going to the federal
Yes,
registry to
although the
read
costs
this
imposed on
crap?
businesses were
And even when you read it and you
much
comment
worse
on it,
by Democrat
I mean, the
administration
regulatory agencies,
Okay, thank you.
ATF,
And I understand
I
our
mean, they
colleagues
just
across the aisle
screw
have
all the
characterized
comments
this
that are against their
legislation
rule
as
and they just push it
protecting
through any
the
damn way.
scammers at the expense of the American people. What would you say to this charge, and what sort of beneficial economic impacts will this legislation truly have for American workers and American job creators?
Well, let's just look at the last administration's effort to pass several different regulations as they left office. You saw an impact on hardworking men and women who are maybe struggling to make ends meet, but trying to afford the basic necessities of life. A new Biden energy final rule issued in December of last year effectively bans gas-powered water heaters in homes by increasing their price by several $100s. Another Biden energy regulation issued in December forces appliance manufacturers to comply with onerous rules that slow down the washing time for dishwashers from an hour to less to more than 2 hours. Last October, the EPA issued a final rule that dramatically raised the cost of repairing commercial and residential air conditioning.
They can literally go through
You
and
have
tell
several
you how much
examples
time
where,
your
hardworking
freaking
men and
dishwasher's
women
got to
struggling
make.
to make ends meet, struggling to put food on
How
the
many
table,
gallons your
afford a
toilet
dishwasher,
is
afford an
used
air
to
conditioner,
flush?
afford a gas-powered water heater, are going to find those products out of reach because of these regulations imposed by the Biden administration. And so it is important.
Natural
that
gas
Congress
should
be
be
able
our
to
cheapest
respond,
form of
that
energy.
this Congress
We
be able to
produce it
respond
when we
quickly
get oil
and
out of the
make sure
ground.
that we
Hell,
stand
they
up
burn it
for,
off because they've
the
got so
hardworking
much
men
of
and
it.
women of this country who we are elected to represent, and
And
stand up
it is
against
green.
the onerous bureaucratic,
Produces no
well,
freaking
the onerous
so-called
bureaucratic
greenhouse
regulations
gases.
put forward by the last administration. So,
Well, thank you very much, Representative Klein. Look, I think that the real scam here was the Biden administration shoving through more than $1 trillion worth of rules and regulations in the very final day.
Now, here, I'm gonna turn my camera on again. I'm standing in the kitchen trying to do stuff here, but most people don't realize. So probably about halfway through the Trump first presidency, we were producing so much natural gas. We didn't know what to do with it. So natural gas prices in the United States dropped, and there were deals worked out to sell natural gas to Poland and other countries. And we were producing enough natural gas, we were exporting it to them, and we were the major energy supplier for those countries. When Biden got in office and he shut all that shit down, the only places Poland and other countries could get their energy from was Russia. So Russia runs a pipeline into Poland. Anywhere that pipeline goes, Putin's personal army goes. And then Russia has complete control over that country. If he's got control of their energy supply, he has control over that entire country, hands down. So Poland and I can't remember which other countries went from relying on the United States and having a relationship with the United States to get their energy to being completely dependent on Russia to get their energy. So Russia has these other countries, Poland included, by the short and goddamn curlies. It basically just turned those countries over to Russia, let Russia control those countries, not a single shot fired because they're dependent on them for their energy. Germany, when they cut their nuke plants, because Germany had a lot of nuke plants, Germany doesn't have a whole lot of natural resources as far as like gas, oil, and all that. When they decided they were going to go green and they cut their nuke plants out, well, then they figured out they needed an alternative source of energy. So then they started getting their natural gas to fire up their power plants from Russia. Putin owns Germany at this point. Putin owns Poland at this point, and a lot of other countries in Western Europe. Nobody talks about that shit. And Biden just slit everybody's throats, especially towards the end of his presidency, when he just basically shut down all exports of natural gas, killed them. He just made everybody have to slide over to Russia for their energy. He gave Putin trillions of dollars with his little fucking banning of exports of American natural gas. So if anybody's blowing Putin, if anybody's doing Putin's bidding, it was fucking Uncle Sniffy and the people that were running him, because obviously he wasn't running shit. He was a goddamn puppet. Was it England? Hold on, what were we saying, Fluff? Oil and gas for export, nuclear for domestic. Was it England? England, I think, might have been on the hook to him too. But we were a major exporter of natural gas. It was powering a lot of countries. That's how they were firing their power plants, steam generation, everything. And Biden just let Putin have all that shit. Putin and China made bank off of a Biden presidency. Simple reminder. Yeah, we have to pass a bill to find out what's in it. Yeah, Democrats are all about transparency unless they're fucking in charge. And they really don't like Elon airing out that dirty laundry. And there are a lot of Republicans that don't like that shit one bit either, because they're just deep in it as any liberal Democrat. All right, let me stop my cam. Let's play this. I'll get back to bitching and cooking.
Final days.
Or is it cooking and bitching?
Hoping and praying
One of the
that the
two.
American people weren't paying attention and didn't see what they were doing. But for 4 years, the American people
We
were
rolling
paying
simple
attention,
tonight, man.
and they
We doing
spoke
hot
in
dogs,
They
mac
made
and
a real
cheese.
course correction and change. This legislation will allow House Republicans to surgically pursue and eliminate the last-ditch efforts of a failed administration to oppose its left-wing agenda on the American people in a permanent fashion. I look forward to supporting this bill on the House floor, and I hope anyone who claims to care about transparency will do the same. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Now recognize Ms. Scanlon for her time asking questions.
Thank you.
Well,
This is not the first time we've seen HR 77, the Midnight Rules Relief Act. It's been a go-to Republican messaging bill for, I think, 15 years. And that whole time, Republicans have never been able to pass it into law because it's bad policy and lazy legislating. Congress already has multiple procedures by which it can block or undo regulatory action. Congress can pass laws with more specificity. Congress can participate in the rulemaking process or rescind specific regulations using the Congressional Review Act. It's worth noting that this bill is specifically mentioned in Project 2025 on page 50 in a chapter authored by the new director of OMB, Russ Vought, who likes it because it would make it easier to dismantle our existing regulatory framework in order to replace it with the deeply unpopular Project 2025 right-wing policies. But the hypocrisy here is striking. You can't say this law is necessary to prevent executive overreach when at this very moment, the Trump administration is engaged in the most egregious, illegal, and unconstitutional.
Every time she says
overreach
egregious, all I can think of is
Congress,
Jack
with
Sparrow.
both houses under the control of the Republican Party, is doing nothing.
I need that in a
Nothing.
meme.
While Elon Musk and his merry band of whatever they are and other Trump appointees
Mention big
are
balls. Say big
rummaging
balls.
through Americans' private information, and national security secrets,
Ooh, he's for the love
shuttering
of God, dude,
agencies
like-
that Congress has established and funded to serve the American people, and firing federal workers, particularly the watchdogs, in violation of federal law. You know, Trump can't legally withhold congressionally appropriated funds, and Elon Musk, an unelected
Oh, yeah.
private individual,
Yeah,
with
England's there too.
huge conflicts of interest, cannot cut or redirect how congressionally appropriated
Putin,
funds
when
are
it comes
spent.
down to it,
You can't
owns
have it
Europe.
both ways, claiming to need more tools to overturn regulations and laws
he
implemented
ain't
by a
even fired a
Democratic
shot.
administration, but being
he
unwilling
owns
to
them.
confront blatantly illegal conduct just because it's Trump and the Project 2025 gang. Don't you think Congress maybe should be focusing its energies on bipartisan bills that actually help, say, lower costs for the American people or have a chance at becoming law? Or maybe Congress should be focused on doing its main responsibility, appropriations, a budget for the 2025 fiscal year, which started months ago. Republicans should come to the negotiating table.
You know,
to get a
Congress
deal on
had,
government funding
and
before
Democrats
the government runs
had
out of money in
plenty of
mid-March, and
time to
working
do a budget
together
for
to
2025.
reassert Congress's core Article 1 authorities. For all their talk about the Constitution, congressional Republicans have abdicated Congress's core constitutional responsibility for lawmaking, for
Very
appropriations,
true,
and
Tuck.
seem happy to sit by while Musk and gang shut down core parts of the federal government. So there's no way around it. Because their guy is in the White House, Republicans don't seem to have a problem with executive overreach and seem to be willingly
How is it
relinquishing
executive
Congress's status
overreach
as a co-equal branch of government.
to stop
So,
fraud and
you
stop
know, we've
waste
talked many times in the past, both
and to
at the
shut
Judiciary
down
Committee and in
unconstitutional
this
agencies?
body
I'm
about
still
why
looking
this
for
is
that
bad policy and a bad bill. And when there's so many
where,
other
where that's
important things on the
unconstitutional.
table right
I
now,
ain't found it yet.
seems like a real waste of Congress's time to be running
If
through
the
this one again.
agency is
Mr. Raskin,
unconstitutional,
did
the
you have
money
something
that
you
it's
wanted to
spending
add?
is
Well,
unconstitutional.
thank you, Ms.
Shutting that
Gillen. I mean, it
agent
is a terrible
agency
waste of
down
time, obviously, but
is
let's
not
take it on its own
unconstitutional.
terms, okay? Here are the rules that were
How much
passed
you
in the
want to
last
bet pink
several
hair back
months
there
of
as a
the
Democrat?
last administration,
Just saying.
okay? Removing lead from drinking water, making cell phones compatible with hearing aids for older people, creating safety standards for infant bath seats, implementing the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, and prohibition of sale of tobacco products to persons under 21. Okay, so let's say you thought all of that was a great idea, but you really think that people under 21 should be able to buy tobacco products.
They ought to be able to buy
So you
tobacco.
want to
They ought to
vote
be
to
able to buy
overturn
beer.
that
They
one,
ought to be able to buy
but you want to
weed.
vote to uphold all of these other ones, you would have to
They're
choose.
legally
You would
adult.
have to violate your conscience or your belief in one case or another. Say you wanted to really get lead out of drinking water, but you also wanted to allow 19-year-olds to smoke. What would you do? You see, I thought that was the Freedom Caucus's whole point. And Chairman
This
Griffith, I
guy's
accept
such
your
a
invitation to
fucking
come to the Freedom
sleazeball.
Caucus. I would love nothing more than to come and to debate this and to
Oh, I would
talk
love
about
to
this
debate
issue.
you on it.
If it was meant
Please.
sincerely.
It wasn't an
Please,
invitation
please,
to come, it was an invitation to
please.
join, since you now see the wisdom of the Freedom Caucus.
Oh, so, well, I've discerned the wisdom of the Freedom Caucus in many cases. I don't get to check it out once before I
still
join.
have
Can I come for one
standing
meeting and have a
invitation to
discussion
any
about this
leftist
and then
that
make
comes
my
into this
decision?
chat if they want to
But in any
debate this
event,
bullshit.
look, regardless
Whether
of
it's
whether
gun
you
control,
consider
whether it's
yourself right,
regulation.
left, center, libertarian, authoritarian, whatever you are, you could be on the Steve Bannon side of the Republican Party and think that Elon Musk is a truly evil individual, as he said, or you could be on the Elon Musk side and you believe in a techno state replacing America's Constitution. Whatever side you're on, this is very
love
poor
how you just
legislation. Is the
absolutely
opposite of what the Freedom Caucus has been fighting for. It's the opposite of what any of us should want. We should vote on one subject at a time. And I come from a state that takes that very
And remember,
seriously,
this
which is why I
douchebag
was
is
drawn
all
to
for
what I
passing
thought,
omnibus bills, especially
the
when they
original
have all sorts of
position was
unconstitutional
of
gun
the author
control
of
and
this
spying
legislation.
and everything else in them.
Thank you. And I do think it is worth
That piece of shit
looking
even
at
letting
some of
that
the
sentence
regulations at
fall
risk
out of
here. I
his
mean, the one
face
about allowing consumers
is
to
maddening.
unsubscribe from a service as easily as they can subscribe to it. That's one of the recent regulations which is wildly popular, particularly in my household.
Our constituents should know how we're voting on that.
Right.
And not say, oh, well, I had to vote against that because I wanted to vote against some other.
Remember what MC
completely
posted
unrelated
up
bill.
there before,
I'm
because
sorry,
we
Mr.
all
Roy and
remember the
Mr. Massey aren't here
Obamacare vote.
because I know they're
We got to
huge
pass it before you
advocates
know
for
what's in it.
what you were just speaking of, and just having single subject bills to address. So thank you for your
Democrats
input,
have
and I yield
fought
back.
every
Gentlelady yields back now.
single
Recognize Mr. Scott for his time for questions.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have a whole lot of questions. I'll just tell you
push
this.
to go to
American
single
citizens are sick and tired of unelected
topic
bureaucrats in
bills or
Washington,
legislation.
D.C. telling them
They
how
have
to live their
fought
lives.
every single one.
And any of these major rules.
Matter of fact, a
have
lot
to
of
come back
Republicans
before the
have,
Committee of
because they're
Jurisdiction,
just as big a status
where
as
they can
these
be
leftist
approved or
ass
rejected
Democrats.
by the people's elected representatives. I plan to vote for the bill, and with that, I yield the remainder of my time.
I thank the gentleman. Now recognize Mr.
I
Coops
said
for
it
his
earlier. There are a
time
lot
for
of
questions.
Republicans that are
I thank the
sweating
chairman.
bullets over this shit.
Thank
that
you to the
Elon's
ranking
pulling
member,
up.
Mr. Klein, both of you for being here and
Him
for
and Big
testifying on
Balls.
this bill.
That's just
Most of my questions are going to be for you, Mr. Klein, whom I consider a friend, but of course, as you can probably gather, on opposite sides of this particular piece of legislation. I'm trying to understand the
Mr. Klein,
urgency
who I consider a friend.
behind
I
this
tell him like it is.
particular
No, you ain't my
bill.
friend.
I mean, you've articulated that it's important. Clearly, you all
I'm
have
not friends with Tyler.
prioritized it in terms of getting this done early in the Congress. Why is this such an urgent matter?
Well, part of it is in response to the over 1,000 regulations that were issued by the outgoing administration within the final months of the
It was
administration.
1,000
Got it.
regs.
Okay.
Jesus
So
Christ,
I
I was
guess
a little low.
given
It was
that,
60
here's
something.
my question.
Over 1,000
We've been in
regulations.
Congress, we've been in session in 2025 for 37 days. Sound about right? Sworn into Congress on
That's
January
about
3rd, right? How many disapproval resolutions have Republicans brought to the floor of the House so far?
I think that there are several in the pipeline, but I don't know of any.
The answer is zero. House Republicans have brought none. You mentioned there are 1,000 regulations that the Biden administration promulgated last year. You're really concerned about them, as are my colleagues on the House. You've endeavored to put not a single disapproval resolution on the floor in the first 37 days. Do you know how many have been considered by committee?
I would love to be majority leader and put them on the floor.
Oh, well, I can tell you, with respect to that particular question, it's an easy answer, zero.
But
No committee has considered a single disapproval resolution
So
of a single rule. The
the
House, as a body,
lead-
has not considered a single disapproval resolution
responsible for pushing the
thus far in the 119th Congress. Apparently, this is a top
resolutions
priority of House
who won't
Republicans.
push them
You are here
through
to ask members to approve a
is
bill
being put on the
that would
hook
allow
right now.
us to disapprove of rules in mass,
Disapprovals.
omnibus fashion, thousands of pages to be considered in a single vote.
Yes, 'cause
and
they
yet
shouldn't
House Republicans
exist.
can't find their way to putting
Gonna
a
lose my
single
shit.
disapproval resolution on the floor. I don't understand it. You care to indulge me?
I would say that there are several that have been introduced and that are moving through the
It's
process.
probably a good thing when
Why
the
not
wife
do
gets
one?
home. I
Why
gotta
why
get
not
off
put
here.
one on the floor before you bring this bill? Why not
Let's
try
take
the
time.
current system? I mean, apparently, I thought the argument here was that there's so
Why
many
not try
different
the current
rules
system?
that
'Cause the
you all are
current
so
system
eager to
hasn't
disapprove
worked
of,
for
and you don't have
100
time to be able to
years
disapprove of
or more.
all of them in the during the pendency of the 119th Congress. So you want to change the rules so that you consider them on an omnibus or in an omnibus way. I don't get it. But anyway, I mean, I think I've probably belabored the point on that front. You made reference to a variety of the different rules that you disagree with. And I thought that my colleague from Pennsylvania and the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee articulated, in my view, the reasons why so many of those rules ultimately inure to the benefit of American families and American businesses. Of course, I'm sure you're familiar with the CFPB's overdraft rule. Are you familiar with that?
I am.
Yep. So this is a rule that the CFPB promulgated, published after open comment to limit overdraft fees for consumers, correct?
That's my understanding.
Right. And by most empirical accounts, it will save Americans $5 billion, over $200 for every American household every year in overdraft fees. Working families who ultimately would have money in their pocket by virtue of this rule that was issued by the CFPB. And this is the type of rule that you seek to disapprove of on an omnibus basis, right?
I would take issue with that. I think that we would be selective in which regulations we were seeking to.
Do you agree with this rule?
I don't have a position on the rule that you mentioned, but
Okay,
the
how
three
about
that
we
I mentioned
make the
before
dollar
would
strong
easily be
enough
taken
and
up
we
by the committee of
make it
jurisdiction, which is
easy
the same
enough
committee,
to
the same issue,
survive
all dealing with
in
appliance
America, making the
regulations,
average
and could be
salary?
put out,
Did
and you're
people
not
don't have to
dealing
worry
with
about being overdrawn in the
a
first damn place? And
multiple
if they don't like
different
the
areas of
overfee
jurisdiction, you're
or
dealing
the
with
overdraft
three
fees from one bank,
regulations that
they move to another
help
bank and then you let the market
protect them, would
decide
help
that shit.
consumers.
Anytime government
One
gets
question, I
involved in
guess,
these
Mr.
situations,
Klein,
they make it fucking
maybe this is a bit
worse.
esoteric. I presume that you believe passionately in the CRA and the disapproval mechanism because it enables Congress to weigh in on a particular rule. And ultimately, if that resolution is successful, to end enforcement or implementation of that rule. Is that a fair assessment of your position?
It is.
Okay. So what happens when an agency just decides, sua sponte, to not enforce or implement any rule whatsoever?
Sua
Why is the
sponte.
disapproval resolution necessary?
Well, it would depend on the agency, the regulation, and
Let me give you a real world example. The CFPB has 2,000 employees, right? The Trump administration just directed all employees to stop work. They issued an order, quote,
Yes, they
not
are another
perform
agency that's
any
not even
work
mentioned in the
tasks
Constitution. They have
this
no
week.
constitutional
They have
grounding,
in effect
and they
shut
shouldn't exist in
down
the first
the
place.
CFPB. They have
So
shuttered the
2,000 of them
headquarters.
hitting the
None
fucking
of the
bricks.
rules that the CFPB promulgated last year are
Learn
presumably
to
being
code.
enforced right now because the agency has decided, or the administration has decided, unlawfully, I might add, and I believe ultimately will be vindicated in the courts, to, on their own, unilaterally say that the agency is done doing any work. I mean, is that, you understand why this seems like a bit of the twilight zone to me, that we're debating Congress's ability to disapprove rules when the Trump administration is shuttering agencies without any input from Congress?
well, my understanding is that Administrator Vaught has instructed employees to work from home and that for the week they are paused during that time. But what
do you mean
think
by
it
paused?
I am quoting the administrator. But
No,
what
no, but I'm trying to understand what paused means. What do you mean?
as you
Pause
said,
means
not performing any of their
reevaluating
tasks.
your.
I got it. So 2,000 employees
You're
who are being
lose your
paid
job.
have just been told
Organization down.
to stop
That's
all
exactly
work.
what it means. You
Don't come in the
idiot.
office. Don't send any emails. Don't make any phone calls. This is your effort at
Oh, they
unrooting
should be
government
making phone
fraud and
calls to
waste
the
and abuse, to
unemployment
have
office
thousands of
and
employees who are directed to do nothing
trying
but
to find
receive a
gainful
paycheck?
employment
Explain this to me or to the
because they
American
shouldn't be
people.
employed
of
by the federal
years
government in the
of
first place.
Democratic congressional leadership mismanaging the authority of the executive branch and essentially giving away Congress's authority to legislate to the executive branch to essentially, through promulgation of regulations, run the government. And so what this institution is seeking to do is to regain its authority to legislate and to actually, for lack of a better term, make Article
Leftists
1
and
great again.
states
Mr.
love
Klein,
their deep state government
this resolution
employees.
would in effect be a dead letter. The Trump administration is taking your authority.
Because you gave it away.
Matt, what's going on, brother, man?
So
How
it's
you?
Democrats' fault that Republicans have decided in the Trump
No,
administration
they ain't doing
to
any real work.
unilaterally
Cede
tell
power to the
workers
executive
within
branch.
these federal
They're an
agencies
absolute
to cease
burden
all
on any
work.
sort of industry that they
I might just say,
so-called
because
break.
again, I have great respect for you, Mr. Klein.
Feelings being
The precedents that are being set right now
Great respect for you, Mr.
are
Klein. If
deeply
I'm
dangerous.
Mr. Klein, I'm thinking,
Deeply
well, I'm
dangerous.
saying, I have
And
zero respect
I
for you, you
worry
piece of shit.
that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, I don't know if it is from a failure of lack of imagination.
Again,
to
I wouldn't survive the
understand
decorum rules.
the consequences of these steps that you're taking. If the president of the United States, via their
Dan
OMB
Foss,
director,
what's going on,
can
brother?
effectively tell agencies and any employee in our
Can't we
federal
all
government
just get along?
to
No, we
cease
can't,
all
Foss.
work
No, we ain't
on a
getting
whim.
along, brother. Not
That's
with
the
these
new
people.
standard? That's really what
That ain't
you're
happening.
comfortable with a future president, a Democratic
Anybody who's
president?
fine
Retaining that
sending
authority
a
and saying,
law
yeah, it's up to me.
enforcement
It's through
agency
my
to
OMB
kick in
director.
my door
I
and
can have
shoot
them
me in
send
the
an email.
face
It doesn't matter if it's
at
100
6 o'clock in
employees
the
or
morning.
100,000 employees. I can
Because
shut
I
down
just did
every single
something
piece
they
of work
don't
that they are
like, or
doing,
I have
whether or not it's
something
been
they
authorized
say
by
I
the
shouldn't
Article I
have.
branch. That's
Nah,
their
we ain't
position.
getting along. I mean, you pretty
We
much
want
want me
Congress to be
dead.
able to speak to
So,
the regulations being issued.
and
by
you
the
want my
executive,
family
regardless
harmed.
of who's in charge.
Well, this is a far cry from
If
that.
you were
in
to
my
slip on a shovel,
I
slide
would recommend
downstairs,
if
and
he
fall into a
would
wood
like to
chipper, it
expound on
wouldn't
that
hurt my
a little
feelings.
You
At
know,
that point.
Mr. Magoo's, thank you for those trenchant observations. It's also significant that you raised the overdraft regulation, because I've not heard our colleagues be willing to criticize a single one of the rules that would be thrown in, other than Mr. Klein's suggestion of the three, which were all in one committee. I'm wondering, one, is he suggesting that this legislation be narrowed to do it subject matter by committee, that they could be bunched by committee, which would be obviously a vast improvement. It's unnecessary, but it'd be a vast improvement over this, terrible potpourri conglomeration
all of them,
of
tell
bringing
presidents you
regulations
can no
in from
longer
different
make
places.
rules on your
But
way out the door.
the CFPB, which is now under
And
attack,
Congress
which has
actually has to do its
essentially
fucking
been
job.
shut down de facto by Elon Musk, saves Americans $15 billion a year. It got consumers
It doesn't save us
$17.5
$15
billion
a year.
back
It makes
since
banks have to
2011.
make up money in
So
other
they're shutting
ways,
down the
which
agencies
costs
that
us
help the American
more
people.
money in the long
The
run.
EPA gives us clean air and clean water.
No,
The NLRB and the Labor Department, which have been targeted, are defending the right to organize into a union and to collectively
And
bargain. The
Democrats love
Consumer
their
Financial
unions because
Protection
unions
Bureau
they support.
protects all of us against rip-off
picking your
practices
color.
by banks and so on. And it's not enough for Elon Musk to arrogate to himself the unilateral power which belongs to Congress and shut down agencies that we've created and that we've appropriated funds for. That's not enough. Our colleagues here have to say, and we want to make it easier for us to overturn all of the rules that have been adopted in the last administration. And we don't want anybody to know specifically what we're voting on, so we'll throw them into one huge stew pot so nobody knows. And then, if I were voting to overturn a regulation removing lead from drinking water, or if I were voting to strip a regulation which creates safety standards for infant seats in bathtubs, I wouldn't want anybody to know about it either. I would try to hide it and lose it in a crowd of other regulations. But I think that's a disgraceful way for us to legislate. And it's something which I thought that liberals and conservatives, right and left, agreed upon. We should vote on one thing at a time.
I couldn't agree more. I want to yield a moment to
Essentially, anybody in Congress, when they are speaking in an official capacity or speaking about their job,
We're already at almost 12.
they should be under oath at
Mr. Chair,
all
I just wanted to
times.
say
If
that
they're caught
Congress
lying, they
uses
ought to get
a
charged with
fraction of our
fucking
time, and there's
perjury.
4 of us and 9 of you. So just. I
But our
appreciate that.
Supreme Court has
So it
already
is.
said in
just have
decision
one quick question for Mr. Raskin.
it is
I know
completely legal for the
our friend
government
has
to
said that
lie right
this
to your
law is
face.
necessary for Congress to reclaim its authority with respect to lawmaking, et cetera. But couldn't Congress right now pass laws that would reclaim that authority, which could overturn regulations that are not agreed to, that or narrow the rulemaking authority that had been given to the executive?
Yeah, obviously, I mean, the claim that Congress needs to do that to reclaim our authority is an irrelevant rhetorical distraction, because we already have that authority with respect to specific regulations. And of course, we can legislate whenever we want. I mean, our friends control the House, the Senate, and the White House. If they want to overturn a safe drinking water regulation, they can just go ahead and do it. Or if they want to use the CRA, they can do it one at a time. But this is an effort basically to say, all right, everybody, let's suck it up, hold our breath, and jump into the deep end of the pool together, because we're going to overturn all of these regulations that the public wants and depends on at once.
And if
We ain't long
Congress
from getting out
similarly
of here.
doesn't think there are enough regulations in certain areas, such as who can go trolling through Americans' data in the Treasury Department or the Labor Department or anywhere else, if it says you have to, if Congress thought it was
If I stay on this,
necessary to
I
keep
am
Mr.
going to run
Musk
right
and
out
his
the front door.
crew out of people's private data and out of his competitors' data, Congress could pass that law if the Republicans agreed, right?
Congress should pass that law. And in fact, One regulation that would be overturned conceivably in this
Wouldn't be asked
omnibus
questions.
monstrous package is called preventing access
I
to
really
U.S.
wish
sensitive
sometimes people would
personal
ask
data
ETF questions.
and government-related data by countries of
sometimes it works
concern.
out good,
So
actually.
if we're afraid that our private data could be
Administration
leaked
is
out,
halfway
including to
worth
foreign countries, that's something that's actually covered by one of the rules that could be targeted by this approach.
I appreciate that. I yield back to Mr. Neguse.
And I yield back now.
Gentleman yields back, now recognize Mr. Jack for his time.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. If I can ask my distinguished colleague from Virginia, Mr. Klein, just a question to help me better understand this piece of legislation. So, and Ms. Fishbach talked about the time limits earlier, but just so I understand, at present, the Congressional Review Act enables us to have 60 days from the publishing of a rule to potentially disapprove of it as a body. And HR 77, does it allow us to consider something within the last year? Is it 365 days, or is it any time period?
He was in my truck.
I thank the gentleman for his question. If those regulations are issued within the last year of an administration, they can be acted on under the current 60-day requirement under the CRA.
The orange one.
And if I can ask just
Spidey
ballpark, how
Muppet
many
is
regulations
out of the front
does an administration publish in a
Carrying
calendar year?
groceries becomes an obstacle course to that one.
Hundreds, thousands,
Tens of thousands.
tens of
I would
thousands.
think.
So in effect, this bill, just to help me understand it, it would make it more efficient for us to address those tens of thousands of regulations.
looks dire.
And it would frankly empower the committee chairs and committee members, the members of our body, to
show
rectify
everybody.
some of
I'm
these
fixing to get
challenges
off
at the
here.
committee level, and then it
We'll
rises up
show
into
everybody.
one package for us to act on efficiently on the floor. Is that right?
I'm sure we got some
Yes, I think
Skyrim
this,
fans out there.
Legislation
Where's
would
my-
restrict.
I will do it this way. So
currently
tell me
the
if this
ability
doesn't
of
look
committees
like
of jurisdiction to bundle
forsworn
together
Skyrim-y.
types of disapproval resolutions for consideration. So the Judiciary Committee could bundle together resolutions related to the last administration's open border policies, the treatment, the misinterpretation
Nerd.
of
Yeah,
asylum
absolutely.
law,
I'm not as much of a
any
nerd as
number
the
of
wife.
issues
I will
related
say
under the
that.
Judiciary Committee's immigration.
I married a
jurisdiction.
band nerd.
Well, I appreciate that
It's
because
just
I do
really
want to
that
spend a little bit of time today just to highlight
yeah,
one
I married a
specific
band
rule
nerd,
that I
but yeah,
care
we
a lot
both love
about that
Skyrim.
directly impacts my district. And I have to imagine every single one of my colleagues has a rule or
I
some
can't
type
wait
of
for the next one.
hindrance that's been imposed upon your constituents that you may want to see
sure.
acted on en
You
masse as
are the
well. For
fan
me, in my congressional district, Georgia's 3rd congressional district, the
behind you.
Department of Energy published a rule,
I have a joke.
89 Fed Reg,
I have a joke.
Did it come from the movie
105,188
American
that
Pie?
effectively will put out of
Not
business
exactly.
highly efficient
Okay.
tankless water heaters, which are manufactured in my
Yeah.
district. I've got a plant within my
Fucking nerds
district.
rule. Okay,
employs
so this is the
550
Wi-Fi.
constituents that's going to go out of business if this rule goes into effect.
This is the joke
And
that I
it's set
cannot
to go into
fake.
effect March 11th. I'll be
Yeah, okay.
pursuing any legislative vehicle I can to address it because ultimately I got
Okay,
550
you're okay,
constituents that are going to lose their
Biden.
jobs if this thing goes through. You mentioned this today, but I just want to note that every single member of our distinguished House probably has an example of this. And I'm hoping to get consideration of this on the floor, but I certainly respect the effort of this piece of legislation to enable me to have multiple options, multiple windows, and multiple avenues to address this because at the end of the day, I got 550 constituents that are hoping to keep their jobs. They're not going to have it at this rule that was published. Very different edition of a midnight rule was published on December
I'm
26th.
feeling
the day after
particularly spicy,
Christmas.
so this,
I've got to
you know what?
address
I
it
might
to
actually
help my
not.
constituents, and I appreciate you bringing this legislation to the floor. Welcome any closing
I've been
comments from you on that. before I
spicy
get
all
back.
night watching what I'm watching.
I appreciate the gentleman's comments. It's exactly what we're trying to enable Congress to enact on behalf of the American people to ensure that Congress makes the laws and not unelected bureaucrats working without any accountability and hindering working men and women to either.
No, I never have.
Or
And I'm never
work in a
gonna.
facility like the one that's in your district. Thank you.
Thank you very
Put a
much. for
gun
the
in my head.
Gentleman yields back, now recognize Mr. Norman for any questions he may wish to ask.
You ain't got a gun big enough.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for the record, I noticed my good friend
And
Coops and I
for like
mentioned
7
some
years.
people or criticizing President Trump's
She played trombone, by the way, in case anyone was asking.
giving pardons to. Let me just name, I've got a whole. I
Well,
don't
she
know how
did
many,
go to band
30
camp.
But let me just tell you the little angels that our past president,
Hold on, get that.
pardon, Richard Templer, sentenced in 1993 in Virginia, death in participation of a drug-related killing. Third co-defendant, Corey Johnson, was put to death on January 14th in the final days. Another little angel, Julius Omar Robinson, sentenced in 2002 in Texas, death of killing 2 men in a drug-related episode. Another little angel, Ricardo Sanchez, sentenced
Let me
in Florida.
finish this dude, or let this dude finish
for
talking.
the
And then
death
we'll kill it.
of a killing of a family, including 2 children.
Will the gentleman yield just for clarification?
I will in just.
Are these pardons or a commutation of death sentences?
I think these are pardons.
Deep clean, a rim
No,
to
I did
These
not.
pardons are.
rails on the inside, that bolt rides on, or scalpel sharp.
Anyway, let me just,
Okay.
it'll give you the flavor. Daniel Troya, sentenced to death in a drug-related, well, that was the one with the children. I mean, I could go on. I didn't get into the drug-related, but you brought up
He's still in jail.
Mr. Trump.
Mr.
Play
Trump
trombone.
is sentenced to life in prison. He's free. These guys are still in jail.
I reclaim my time. Look at the record, but you can go into the pardons.
Well, I always
that
wanted
this
to play Val trombone.
ex-president
We
did.
didn't have one.
I'll also say that.
You've told me about a valve trombone.
Yeah.
Y'all keep mentioning,
I always wanted to.
She can also
fact
play
that
cello.
we are having investigations.
And plays.
Elon Musk is doing this free of charge.
Flute,
I
trumpet.
forget what you
Flute.
said you referred to him as an imbecile or something. I think he's made it in the private sector.
Yes,
pretty well.
years ago.
And I think what he is uncovering,
years ago.
free of charge, the American people are
Because I
shocked.
wasn't a fan nerd
And I
all the
hope
time.
Y'all continue to
And I wasn't the
protest because
exact
when American
fan
people
nerd,
say,
even when I was
American
in
people
band.
find out where their tax
I
dollars
spent more
went,
time
this is government going awry. And
Well,
the
doing
USAID is the first one. The CFPB
All I gotta
needs to
say
be
is
abolished.
don't
And
take
the things that were
teenage
brought
kids to
up about the
Germany
fees,
when they can have off-campus lunch.
you know, they're competitive
Buy
industry with
And
other
they can
banks.
buy
They're
cigarettes
com-
and
you know,
beer.
government shouldn't
And
be
there's
telling
shuttle
them
buses
what
that
fee
will
to
get you
charge or
anywhere
not
you wanna
charge,
go.
because they have to.
Yeah, don't do
So I
that.
think it's interesting. That's off topic, but I wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, don't do that.
The commutations, whether it's.
So, I'm
that
sorry,
cards or
you-
whether it's, I'm reclaiming my time. I'll give you a chance.
Okay.
Unique.
And the
They
fact
need
that
the damn thing.
continue to get on Elon Musk. The American people love what he's doing. 77 million people
Well,
voted
that's
for President
law.
Trump to stop this kind of abuse that's going on in this country.
One of my students,
And I think this is just one
a set of freaking clamps locked up on the
Mr.
weld
Klein,
stand so she could
I
break
think
off of it. and run.
President,
Can you get that off?
Biden
Why?
had 1,406
I want to
rules,
break a nail.
that are going to be subject to the look back.
I just had my wrist operated on. I'm in here doing all this shit. And you're
We've
afraid to
got,
break a nail?
People,
You
companies in
one
my
hand that you
district,
had surgery
a
on.
dryer
All 10 of my fingers.
800 people.
Your poor little finger.
Very upset.
I'm sorry. You guys are getting introduced to the
Gas,
conversations
you
we
know,
have all
they're
the time.
taking
I just
gas
got started
away
today, I wanna hear it.
from being able to manufacture.
And
This is a
livable.
competitive industry, not government.
Would you like to explain that
run.
on job
And
application?
can you hit on a few
Changing
more
jobs.
ludicrous
What have you been
things
doing?
that occurred during the
Well, I
time frame
was
that require a look back? Because I remember the
being a
gas,
collector for
outlawing
board.
gas, ovens. I didn't know the
Get out of here, guys, or my sense of humor is going
units
to
that they
go
were
way
trying
off
to
the rails. It will after I get out of
Can
here.
you name
but
just a
it
few more
just
that would give us an
won't be on
example
YouTube.
of what this
Um,
insanity that would
Hey, I mean, I wasn't.
Well,
consider?
and
Shotgun, yeah.
you hit the nail on the head when you said that.
Anyway,
these
I love all you guys
businesses,
to death.
American
Thanks for hanging
workers,
out.
American families being affected.
You
by
guys
these
are
regulations,
seriously
and they're
like
not
therapy.
just in the energy sector, but
We'll
those
catch you on the
where,
next one. Hopefully, we'll catch you in some
this
chats and stuff later.
Green New
Keep
Deal
it
administration
cool. Keep that thing on you at all
focused its attention.
times.
And
And I will try to
single-purpose
to
legislation.
post anything
Let's talk about
about
that
the
Inflation Reduction Act.
gun
Let's talk about all those provisions.
bills coming up in
and-
Alabama.
and
There's a couple of
how
hearings
many
tomorrow.
different
Where they're going to
parts
get
were in
some
this
supposed
mammoth
to
trillion-dollar bill.
get a little bit of debate.
As I said, you have
Gotta be. I don't
air
have to be in
conditioning
work till a
units,
little
you
later
have,
tomorrow, so I'm going to try to stream those.
dishwashers being
overregulated,
overregulated, gas power
just
water
to
heaters being
kind of point those out. And then
energy
Colorado
efficiency,
is
what you have is
Thursday with
instead
their
rising costs for
complete
American consumers.
ban on freaking
And
anything that's semi-automatic and mag fed, basically. So we'll try to keep an eye on that
You know,
too.
the
Anyway,
list can
you're
go
perfectly
on and
cool.
on.
I love all
As
you guys
far
to
as-
death.
I don't know whether
Let me
it
go
fit in the
feed
parameters
kiddos
that we're talking
and
about for this
get the wife
legislation,
while
but
she's over here swinging her finger around.
insane
She cut it.
student loan
sprayed
bailouts, the
stuff on it
insane
to clean it.
green new scam with the
hold
$7,500
on.
electric vehicle. Government telling Americans what they need
Yeah, I
to
know.
buy for cars. It's insanity.
Why are you telling me that?
Fees
Mom's
on
been in this
asylum
room plenty of
applicants,
times. She's talked to a lot of the guys.
What the past administration has done is force
Well,
these kind of
I
actions for
promise
us
you, it's
to
not
take. It's
the
going to
worst
help
thing she's
right
ever heard me
wrongs.
say.
And I can give you one more.
So,
The
you guys be cool. I love you guys to death, man. Let's get out of here.
to force
Y'all be
Americans to
cool.
abandon
We'll catch you
gas-powered
after a
cars for
while, man.
electric ones would make 50% of all